Hello, and welcome to the IT Automation Summit on empowering your organization with trending automation strategies for success. This special webinar event is brought to you by Red Hat and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Scott Becker. I'm from Actual Tech, and I'm excited to be your host today. Now, before we get to today's great series of presentations, we have a few housekeeping items that are going to help you get the most out of this session. First off, we want this to be an informative event for you, so we encourage any questions in the questions box in your webinar control panel. While we won't be taking live questions from the online audience during these sessions, we will pass them along to the Red Hat team so they can get back to you. That Q&A panel is also the place to let us know about any technical issues that you might be experiencing. A browser refresh will fix most audio, video, or slide advancement issues. But if that doesn't work, just let us know in the Q&A and we'll provide further technical assistance. Now, second, in the handout section of your webinar control panel, you'll find that we're offering resources from Red Hat. You can click on them at any point during the presentation. Feel free to share those resources with any friends and colleagues who might be interested. Now, third, at the end of this webinar event, we will be awarding a $250 Amazon gift card to one lucky registrant. Of course, you must be in attendance today to qualify for the prize. The official terms and conditions of today's prize drawing can be found in the handout section. Just scroll to the bottom and you'll find the link with the details there. Now, we've got 6 presentations for you today that are hand-picked from a recent day-long Red Hat event featuring top Red Hat subject matter experts and partner experts from Red Hat's strategic technology partners like IBM, Microsoft, Dynatrace, and Arctic. So settle in for a full day of learning about the Red Hat Ansible automation platform. Now, first off is a kickoff keynote from Walter Bentley, who's the Catalyst Strategy Director for the Ansible Business Unit at Red Hat. Walter's going to share the Red Hat vision for mission-critical automation, highlight how some of Red Hat's customers are putting it into action, and outline how automation can help your organization be better prepared for successful AI adoption with Ansible.
The topic for today is an interesting one. Automation as the key to unlocking the potential of AI for enterprise IT. And I want to be clear, today's talk is not about AI, right? So if you came to hear about AI solely, I want to bust your bubble a little bit and tell you that. But what we are going to talk about is what is the foundation you need so that you can be successful with AI, right? And so AI is obviously very popular. It's a buzzword. It gets people excited. Everybody wants to do it. But what we have to remember as technologists is that in order to move forward with it properly, we do have to have a specific foundation in mind or a specific foundation already in place. And if we don't have that foundation in place, our success is not going to be there. And so hopefully today, the takeaway from the keynote today is that you learn what the foundational components that you will need to be successful when you do decide to transition into the AI world. Okay? Is that fair enough? All right. Did I lose anybody yet? All right. You still with me? All right. Thank you. I appreciate that. I love that. All right. You're going to hear more from that gentleman in the back very shortly. He's very entertaining, so you're going to love him. Okay. Much more entertaining than me. Some of the talking points today, I love to give the talking points ahead of time so that you kind of have an idea of where I'm going with the information. And again, at the end, we will have time for some Q&A. So please make sure you write your questions down so you don't forget them because I want to answer them. We're going to set the stage, right? We're going to talk about how automation is mission critical. For many of you in the room today, I know I won't have to convince you of that. You already recognize and acknowledge that. But I just want to give you a little bit more information that you can take back to your leadership to convince them, right? If you needed to. We're going to talk about a force multiplier, right? And what is a force multiplier, right? That thing that's going to help you to accomplish your purpose faster and smoother and quicker and easier, right? So we're going to talk about what is the force multiplier behind that. Obviously, we at Red Hat have some really strong opinions about that. And if you want to disagree with me, that's fine. We can just have to do it over a beverage this afternoon, right? So how is automation and AI connected? Examine the art of the possible. That's a term that I've been using a lot lately because I feel like it very well communicates the idea of being able to show someone what they can possibly do with automation that they may have not thought of already. And so I really enjoy having those type of conversations and, of course, doing it at scale with adoption. All right, let's jump in. So the idea here, and again, I'm going to move pretty quickly through these first few slides only because they're really meant to just kind of give you a visual reminder of what the point is. The idea here is that we all want to be able to move into the AI era, right? It's the new sexy thing, and it's been proven to be very effective. And what we've come to realize is that in order to do that, you still need to have a foundation. And the idea is that in order to properly be able to transition into doing AI, you need to have an IT ops strategy, right? You need to have a very strong IT ops strategy. And in order to do that, you must embrace automation to be able to get there. It's not an option. It's not I can move into the AI world without having an IT ops foundation. You can't, right? And we're going to demonstrate a little bit about how that kind of becomes a difficult divide, right? Automation is no longer a nice to have, right? I remember when I first took this role 8 years ago, and I was the automation practice lead for services consulting. We had to do a lot of convincing of our customers that automation is something important and something that they had to do. Now we no longer have to do that, right? Automation is no longer nice to have. It's a requirement in order to keep up with your businesses, right? To be able to compete in your world, whatever your business world is that you're working in, right? The difference is though, now that we know that automation is no longer a nice to have, are we treating it as mission critical? Are we treating it as a priority when we're doing things in our technology space? Is it the first thing? Are we having an automation first mindset when we're going to do that thing? Or do we kind of default back to the old ways of manual first and then try to circle back around to thinking about automation? And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but what we have to do is in order for us to mature our IT ops strategy, we have to really start thinking about automation being first. And we have to think about how can we use automation to drive our business value. I constantly talk to our customers and I say to them, if you're not using automation to actually drive the business value of whatever your organization does, then you're missing out on the innovation, right? You're not actually innovating with automation. And the whole idea is for you to be able to begin to innovate. And so as you're thinking about what can I automate next, try to focus on, well, what is my business doing and how can I add value to being able to do that thing? And focus on those type of items that you can automate. So the question is that now that we know that automation is no longer a nice to have, it's a requirement. We know that it should be mission critical. But then the question is why is it so difficult? Why have organizations still having difficulty being able to kind of cross into that space? And we've identified 3 different areas that we feel our customers have seen, and we wanted to make sure we share that with you as well, right? So the first one up is IT skill gap. And what is mean by that is the IT skill gap is that we have much more new software and capabilities coming out. And as you as technologists, do you necessarily have the time in your day to learn all of those new technologies, right? The answer to that is no, right? You know, between the hyperscalers, between all the additional applications that are part of their platforms, all the new additional software coming out, now you have AI jumping into there, right? How do you keep up? Right? And the whole point around this is that this is where IT automation can help you fill that gap, right? But you have to kind of, there's more to it than just that. Then we're looking at day 2 ops, right? Are still far too manual. Let's be real, right? And I guess I'll be honest with myself. Despite the fact that I work for a company that makes automation software, we still do things manually, right? You would think that everything is about an Ansible playbook or a role, right? It's not. The reason for that is that unfortunately, you know, we still have a lot of technical debt that still exists amongst our data centers, amongst all of our software stacks. And in order to unravel all of that, right, it takes time. So you still end up doing things manually. And so that's a real thing. And then of course the last one is this just too much complexity, right? The workflows that you've created or the workflows that exist inside of your organizations have been there for many, many years, written by a person who has probably left many, many years ago, and you're still using those technologies, right? Why? Because they work. Let's be honest. But the reality is that in order for you to be able to move forward and mature, you have to try to find a way to get rid of that complexity. And so this is the reasons why, we're finding that the technology advancements that the enterprises want to take part of and do, they're unable to do because they're kind of still dealing with these problems. But the good news is that, there is a way to get around it or solve for it. With this slide, this is another slide that I thought was very interesting as well. Again, demonstrating the gap between your skills and how many devices that you're having showing up, right? So it says on average, the devices grow year over year by 12%, right? So it means that the more resources that have to be managed, whereas the people that are being hired is staying the same, right? So at some point you have to do something to get past this challenge that's put in front of you. Now, when I saw this statement, and this is a statement that's supported by the Boston Consulting Group last year, they did a study that 70% of digital transformations fail. Just think about that for a second. 70% of organizations that are embarking on a digital transformation actually fail. And the reason for this is that there's still too many organizations that make technology decisions but don't address enough of the systematic changes to actually make it happen, right? Their hearts are in it. They want to make this change, but they're not actually making or addressing all of the things that they need to address in order to be successful with that digital transformation. In order for digital transformation to be successful or to deliver on its promise, it takes an entire shift of mindset and culture as well. And that's the piece that is usually missed by our leadership, is the cultural and the mindset shift that's required with that digital transformation. And so it's not just a behavior in changing of our technologies, it's also a behavior in changing of our people and how we look at things and how we collaborate and get things done. Again, we'll talk more about this as well as to how we can solve for that. Actually, a gentleman that is near and dear to my heart is going to come up later and talk more about how you can drive more of adoption through creating your internal communities, right? That's yet another way to support that cultural change. So tech debt. Tech debt is it's a great use case for AI. Right? It is the exact reason why AI exists, is because you have technology debt. But it's also a barrier to adoption. And what is meant by that is that in order for you to truly adopt AI, you need to have a foundation in place, right? That IT ops foundation that I spoke of before. If you don't have that, trying to implement AI on top of not having a foundation, it just resolves in what is kind of shown here, right? You got clunky old software trying to be innovated by AI, right? I was trying to think of a good analogy of that. That's like having a 1979 Pontiac Le Mans, which is my first car. But on the inside, I've installed an Apple Play system, right? So I can listen to and watch, I can, answer my phone calls and I can answer all my texts on the dashboard, but the engine doesn't run, right? Because my 1979 Pontiac Le Mans, it used to start every other day. So if I needed to go someplace on a Tuesday or a Thursday, it was out. I was always missing work on Tuesday and Thursdays. Obviously, this is years ago, right? But the whole idea of that, right? You have an old vehicle with new technology. It doesn't exactly work, right? So that's the idea that we have to kind of keep in mind. We have to create a foundation, and we think at Red Hat, we think the middle ground of creating that foundation is making sure that automation is something that is present and considered important. So where does it leave us, right? At this point, right, we have the challenges, right, that are connected and pervasive. We know that we can't just throw money at a problem, right? It doesn't just solve for it, right? Investing in AI or buying AI just doesn't solve your problem just because you brought it. You still have to do something. And then, of course, there are changes in the mindset that haven't been implemented, right? So these are the things, this is where it leaves us. And so this allows us to kind of move into our next area, which is talking about a force multiplier. And as I mentioned, a force multiplier is supposed to be something that's supposed to help you be able to do the thing that you're trying to do faster, easier, and simpler, right? And so these are some stats that we think are very interesting to share with you around automation adoption, right? So in 2026, 30% of enterprises will automate more than half of their network activities, right? In comparison to 2023, it was only 10%, right? So there's incremental increases, right? That people have identified, or organizations have identified, that it is really important to focus on automation. By 2025, 70% of organizations will all implement structured infrastructure automation, right? Back in 2021, it was only 20% of organizations felt that was necessary. So you can see there is absolutely, we are past the tipping point, as they would say, when it comes to automation and adoption, right? We're moved past that. We're now into the point where we're trying to figure out how do we best do it within our organizations. So again, from a Red Hat perspective, we feel that Ansible is and can be that force multiplier within your enterprises. And it comes from a multi-directional type of approach. Not just looking at it from Ansible in the clouds or using Ansible to be able to automate your hyperscaler activity. We look at it from the sample of Ansible having certified and validated content that is able to be provided to you, used out of the box, as well as being able to focus on event-driven automation. Ansible, which is something that was released at last summit and still being perfected. But the reality is you can now move into a space where you have decision-making that can be part of your automation stack, right? And it's all built into the Ansible automation platform already. Getting a little bit more into the event-driven Ansible, because this is our new functionality, and this is something we're kind of pushing our customers to pay attention to, is the idea of being able to have built into this, being able to observe, evaluate, and respond, right? You can observe something that happens, so you can tie an alert to an event to an alert. That alert can then trigger an automation job template execution of some sort, and then be able to, you can evaluate it and then be able to respond to that with some sort of automation component, right? Being able to tie all those together and no longer having to manually be able to observe and then react on something, right? You can actually have those decisions made by that high-level rules engine that's now built into the Ansible automation platform with the event-driven automation capability that's now added, right? So just think of from the standpoint, I did a demo many years ago on the OpenStack where I had Nagios monitoring a resource. And when that resource went offline, I was actually able to trigger a job template to be able to execute, to be able to resolve and bring that resource back online, right? So think of it from that standpoint of being able to close the loop of that workflow. Now, I know that's a scary thing, right? You're allowing technology to make decisions on your technology. But at some point, you got to trust that if you're able to be able to create a system with fallbacks, right, and checks and balances, that this is something that you can actually move into, right? So this is no longer a dream, but more of a reality, right? Going a little bit further, just talking about how event-driven automation actually now helps you really be able to make automation mission critical and make an impact within your organization, maximize your return on your existing investment, shortening your mean time to resolution, right? So shortening your outage time, and then also being able to reduce service tickets overall is the reasons why you should seriously consider being able to look at the event-driven components that are now part of the Ansible automation platform. If you are familiar with it, please feel free to ping me before the event is over, and I'll do my best to kind of give you an overrun of what it exists. But again, something to consider. We just wanted to kind of leave that behind and something to consider. Again, we talked about automation across the hyperscalers, right? So just the flexibility you gain in being able to orchestrate any of the platforms, right? Whether it be additional platforms or any of the Red Hat platforms, be able to operationalize and then be able to do that governance on any of the cloud platforms, right? So just being able to creating the connecting fiber there between all your hyperscalers, right? And being able to manage the lifespan of the resources there, as well as being able to make sure that you can migrate workloads between those different hyperscalers, right? The use cases around that are almost endless. So just something to consider. If you're not automating how you're utilizing your resources on your cloud, you definitely want to consider that something that you should seriously consider looking into and moving forward with. Okay. So the next area we're going to move into is the automated foundation for AI. And to me, this slide by itself pretty much sets up the whole idea of what that foundation needs to look like. In order for you to have a foundation with automation, you need to create an automation strategy. And what I always tell my customers is you need to treat automation as you would enterprise architecture. When it comes to enterprise architecture, one of the first things they do is they establish a standard, they establish a strategy, they document that, they communicate that to people so that you know how to be able to move forward with that strategy and that standard. You need to do the same thing with automation. You need to standardize how you're going to automate, how you're going to write your content, where you're going to store it, how are you going to name your variables. I know all those things seem very micro and very specific and maybe not so important, but they do become important because in order for you to automate at scale, you do have to have a strategy. In order for people to want to use your strategy, you have to document it in some way, right? So that standardization is actually really important. And then once you go from there, you think that, oh, I've standardized, I've created some content, I'm good to go. Yes, but you have to remember that automation content needs to be treated as if it was a application or as it was application code, right? Every once in a while, you will need to go back and do updates to that content and figure out if there's a way that you can streamline it, make it better, utilize a new collection that's available. Maybe that now exists that didn't exist before. So you will have to actually be able to codify or be able to go back and look at that content and refresh it every once in a while. Right? It's not just you create the content one time, you create the automation content one time and then never look at it again, right? You want to constantly be pulling out that information from your SMEs, automating as much as possible and revisiting it when you have a chance, right? And then you need to operate. Wow, I can't speak today. Operationalize it, right? The final step in the process here, where you want to be able to really be able to create the end-to-end process with automation. You don't want to just do as I would call it, ad hoc or tactical automation. You're doing this one specific thing. You want to look at the end-to-end workflow and include as much automation in that as possible. And it's this layering of tiers and things you need to do that creates a solid automation around automation. And so this will set you up for being able to adopt AI when you are ready. This behavior right here. So I love this slide, and this is a slide that I use very often when I'm talking to my customers because it kind of helps explain what that foundation looks like. So automation as code within the Ansible automation platform. The whole idea around that is that Ansible automation platform does help you get that stronger foundation for you to be able to eventually adopt AI in your enterprise. And these are just some of the many examples of how we kind of would categorize, whether it be infrastructure as code, configuration as code, ops as code, policy as code, right? These fancy names that have been developed over the last few years, while it may not mean as much to you personally, just know that there's specific behaviors in your organization that you need to look to. You need to have at least a strategy around in order to be successful when it comes to automation. The good thing is, and this is what we're very proud of, is the Ansible automation platform helps you with all of those components, right? It has a very specific developer experience built into it so that creating content can be easier. It has a very specific component around being able to store your content in the automation hub, right? So you know how to be able to find that content. You can advertise it to others for them to be able to find it as well. And then, of course, the core component of Ansible automation platform, being able to schedule out execution, right, across your resources and across your inventory. All of those capabilities put together, up to and including a new capability that's going to be spoken about at Summit, around being able to define policies around your automation. So definitely be on the lookout for that. But Ansible automation platform helps you solve for that in many different ways. I'm going to skip past that. I'm going to go right here. So if I had to kind of give you a high-level architectural view of kind of what I'm referring to, in the sense that it's an end-to-end process with the Ansible automation platform that helps you solve for, right? Certified Ansible content collections or validated collections, if you've never heard of that, that's actually content that has been pre-created, packaged, and supported by Red Hat that is available to our customers, right? So you're not starting with nothing from day one when you're dealing with Ansible automation platform. And then you kind of go in, as I mentioned, where you'll be able to publish that content and make that content available is the automation hub. And then there's multiple ways of doing that. We have an automation hub that can be on premise, as well as additional capability around that. Now we're talking about the controller and how it interacts with your devices and your inventory, and utilizing something called an automation mesh, which simplifies being able to determine where your inventory is and being able to execute against that inventory in the fastest way possible. Right? It's this ecosystem that I'm referring to when I'm talking about the Ansible automation platform. So if you are not a customer of ours and you have not had a chance to try that out, please feel free to reach out to me or any other Red Hatter. We would love to be able to walk you through. Very soon, we're going to have a capability where you can actually do a full demo of the product without having to talk to your account executive, right? So it's something you'll be able to do freely, but there'll be more to come on that. That's not exactly ready yet. I'm kind of giving you a precursor. If you tell anybody I told you, I'm going to deny it and call you a liar. I'm just joking. But just be on the lookout for that, right? Because we recognize that a lot of times you want to be able to feel and touch and see what the platform is like. And if we're not giving you the ability to do that easily, right, then you may decide to go elsewhere, right? So we want to close that gap and make that a little bit easier for you to consume. So be on the lookout for that capability. All right, I only have 5 minutes left, so I'm going to really start talking fast. I promise. So this slide here is something that I won't spend much time on, but again, when it comes down to governance, risk, and compliance, we heard you. A lot of customers reached out and said, we wish that we had a better way to be able to maintain the governance around our automation content, and we heard you. Right, so there's additional capability coming. As I mentioned before, that policy is code. That is a new capability that's going to be coming out that's going to be able to give you that governance. Very similar to one of our competitors that start with a P. I'm not going to say their name, but in that be similar right, where you can actually maintain governance over the resources that you're automating against. And so there's some exciting news coming around that. I would be amiss if I didn't show you the whole Ansible ecosystem and basically how it's growing, right? And it sets a proper ground for you to be able to really be able to transition into AI in the sense that Ansible is the core of many different things, right? Edge, traditional infrastructure, cloud native, private clouds, right? The list goes on, right? Ansible works with all of these technologies and in many different ways. And so again, when we had to go back to setting a foundation for automation, you should consider Ansible as being a strong contender when it comes to that. Right? There's not too many technologies that are able to work with all of these integration points like Ansible can. Right? Yes. Absolutely. The private cloud one? Oh, yes. So yes, it can help with and also be able to help you off of, right? If you know, for many of you who may be deciding that you're wanting to renew your platform stack, right? Ansible, Red Hat in conjunction with OpenShift and Ansible, right, has a solution where you can actually, you giving me a thumbs up? Okay. It has a solution where you can actually migrate off of your VMware stack onto a cloud native platform and also have built into that automation, right, directly connected to that. And so again, not to say that anyone is turning tail and running, but if you did want a new option or you wanted to future-proof your platform, right, Red Hat does have a solution for you around that. So, give me one. I got 2 more minutes, and I'm gonna just make sure you write that question down, and I'm gonna get your question. I promise you. It is based on. What's that? It's based on this. Mm-hmm. Just a couple questions. You want to use the mic? Where do we put it as IBM Cloud? Is it going to be into public cloud that Ansible is handling? So are you asking about Ansible working with IBM Cloud? Okay. So admittingly, I don't know the answer to that question. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to make up something. But I will get an answer for you on that. We've obviously been focused on a lot of the other hypervisors. You would think that, our big brother, we would, so I'm sure that there's a plan and I'm sure there is something there. I just don't know it. And I don't want to make something up for you, but I will get you an answer. See, I try to be honest. So I will be honest with you. These next slides, the art of the possible, I have 20 slides, if more probably behind this slide. I'm not going to go through all of them, right? The whole idea of this was to be able to demonstrate all of the arts of the possible when it comes to Ansible, right? Whether you're dealing with networking, whether you're dealing with, helping to tame your clouds, event-driven Ansible. And I know I'm moving fast. If anyone's trying to take pictures, I promise I can share these with you. We have an integration or a solution when it comes to anyone who's leveraging Terraform, right? Anyone who already is using OpenShift or is interested in using a cloud container platform, we have a solution for that. We have a solution for Ansible when it comes to security automation. We have a solution when it comes to ServiceNow, right? That's a pretty obvious one, right? You're creating ServiceNow tickets, and what if you wanted to attach some sort of action to that, right? Ansible can be used for that. We have a direct integration for that. We have edge solutions. We have Windows solutions, right? I'll go back to the Windows solution because I know that one is usually something that people not be aware of, right? That we do have solutions of working with Windows resources, right? It's not just all Linux, right? We do have a capability around day one and day two operations when it comes to Windows as well. And so if you're not sure about that or don't have knowledge of that, or you want to learn more about that, we would love to tell you about that, right? That's something that we get a lot of questions about. Oh. The clock is going up now, so that means I'm out of time. All right, so I'm gonna stop here. I did have a few more. I'll just leave this on the screen as I kind of close out. But the whole if you take anything away from what I said here in the keynote, my takeaway ask for you is to remember that in order for you to be able to really seriously start considering AI, you do need to have an IT ops foundation, which means you need to consider automation as being something that's critical for your organizations. Ansible is a viable solution to being able to do that. We think that. We feel very strongly and confident about that. I'll let you decide if you agree. And so please, just something to keep in mind. And if you ever need help with any of those activities, just know that Red Hat is here to support you. Okay? Thank you so much for your time. Sorry I ran out of time. No, I love applause. So I ran out of time. So I will try to quickly take a few questions, and I apologize for that. I get long-winded at times, but if anyone has any questions for me, oh, I have a hand here. Hold on, he's going to bring you a mic. The mic will make its way to you. There you go.
Hey, so you mentioned that about automation is prerequisite for AI, but nowadays we are hearing that AI is helping in the automation. And it will eventually help us or ease the automation thing. So how you are saying that AI depends on automation?
Right. So think of it from the aspect of, with AI, you have to dictate or tell the AI what is it that you want it to produce for you, correct? Right? That's just like with ChatGPT, right? The first thing that comes up is a prompt. It prompts you, what do you want it to do, right? In order for you to be able to tell it things about your business, you need to be able to kind of untoil your business and understand what you're really doing from a technology standpoint. And one of the things that automation gives you is that being able to create a roadmap to being able to explain what you're doing, how you do it, and what you're doing. Let's say, for example, you're deploying a new API, right? The steps of deploying that API, if you don't actually have those written down, how can AI help you to deploy that API? Right? You can't tell it deploy an API. It doesn't know anything about your technology stacks. It doesn't know anything about the enterprise, the architectural decisions that your company has made. It doesn't understand anything about the security requirements you have, and whether you're a FSI customer, whether you're someone that's in the private sector, right? It doesn't know any of your requirements. It doesn't know what platforms you use. Do you use the cloud? Are you still on VMware? Are you on OpenShift? So at the end of the day, you need a set of instructions, for lack of a way of putting it, to tell AI what to do. The automation is those instructions, right? Automation makes you stop and actually document what you are doing. And then when you're creating your content, you now have a script that you can actually feed into that AI, right, now to go and do what you need it to do. The AI can't just do it with, it needs so much, basically what I'm saying is that it needs so much information that you don't have available unless you actually have taken the time to make that information available. Automation is an easy way to be able to lead you to that. That's all I'm going to stand on. Now tomorrow someone may come out with an AI thing that can solve for all those things. Great. But we know right now in this moment that's a thing.
We can train AI, the effort we are putting for the automation, the same effort we can put train the AI to do the automation.
Right.
But I understand your point.
At this moment, where we are. At this moment, that's where we are. Next time we have an Automation Toronto, it may be a bot up here doing this, not me. Who knows? Any other questions? Now you've been making good eye contact with me and making me feel good. So if you don't throw me any bad questions. No, I'm just kidding.
My question is about the event-driven Ansible.
Yes.
So what's different from in AAP compared to Tower? Because in Tower we have that already. We haven't. You can call the workbooks or the playbooks or the workflows via an API calls, and we can integrate that with different type of software. So what's different with the event-driven automation in AAP? Right.
So that's a great question, and I promise I didn't bribe him to ask that question. That's a great question. So admittingly, and we'll be open and honest about this, right? Within Controller, because I know you said Tower, but you know it's been rebranded as Controller. Within Controller, it doesn't really allow for you to make complex decision making, right? It's a very simple yes no. If it's there, if it's not there type of operation, right? Whereas within event-driven automation, it's a complex rules engine that's built into it that has much more logic to be able to allow you to be able to make decisions based on an event that occurs. That's the difference. I won't go and give you I can give you a much longer marketing explanation. But the reality is within Controller, the rules or the logic that's allowed in there is very simple. Within EDA or event-driven automation, it's a complex rules engine. And you need that complex rules engine to be able to make decisions.
What a great keynote. Now that we've got a good sense of Red Hat's vision for mission-critical automation, we're going to roll into a session about delivering on the full promise of IT automation. This one's a panel featuring IT leaders from Microsoft, IBM, Dynatrace, and Arctic. Moderating this panel is Corey Vokey, Senior Director of Technology Sales for Red Hat.
So good morning, everybody, and welcome to Ansible Automates. It's my pleasure today to be moderating this expert panel that we've put together from Red Hat's partner community. Each of these individuals you see today, these fine individuals, are recognized across Canada as both experts as well as thought leaders in the areas of, well, one, you know what, automation, but also AI, observability, and cloud. Before I get into the actual structure of today's session, though, I'd like to, on behalf of Red Hat, say thank you to everyone in attendance today. It pleases us to no end to see such experience or such excitement around both Ansible as a product, but also interest in Red Hat as an organization that can help you with your automation goals. So I know we're running out of time, so I'm just going to get right into it. The structure of today's session will be as follows. I'll first start by briefly introducing each of our panel members. Next, I'm going to have each panelist share a fun fact about themselves, something to get the party started and break the ice. Next up, I'll be moderating the actual panel discussion itself. And lastly, we're going to leave 10 to 15 minutes at the end to give the audience an opportunity to ask questions. So everyone, I will say though, don't wait to the last and then say, oh, what's my question? Get your question ready, please. And we want to make sure that we get to the full value of those 10 to 15 minutes for you all here today. So thank you. And listen, with that, and without further ado, let's get started. So introductions. Right next to me, we have Krishna V. Krishna is a senior technical specialist with Microsoft Azure. Next to him, we have Manav Gupta. Manav is the Chief Technology Officer with IBM Canada. And next up, we have Michael. Michael Kennedy is the Vice President of Product Engineering at Arctic. And last on the panel, we have David Jones. David is the Regional Vice President of Systems Engineering at Dynatrace. And lastly, everyone, as Walter mentioned, my name is Corey Vokey. I'm the tech sales leader for Red Hat Canada, and I'll be moderating the session today. Before we get in to the fun facts, everybody, let's give a round of applause to this panel. Give us some support. Awesome. So thank you, gentlemen, on behalf of Red Hat and the audience for being here today. Very much appreciate it. So listen, Krishna, fun fact about yourself. Why don't we start with you? Will I get a seat and get comfortable with you all? Yeah. And then we'll take it down to the end. How about that?
So, are you able to hear me? Yeah. So one fun fact is I do work on translating English movies to Tamil movies. Wow. So that's, I don't know, it's fun fact or it's like I've been doing for a couple of years. So yeah, that's a good stick over with me.
Thank you. Mano?
Sure. So, fun fact about me. So I was, as I like to joke with my wife, strong-armed into moving to Canada. So a little bit of background about myself. I was obviously born in India, but I lived in England for many, many years. And I met my wife on one of the business trips. We decided to get married. She moves to England. And then, within the 6 months, she goes, no, I'm going back. Can't drive stick, it rains all the time, roads are too narrow. And then, so she twisted my arm into relocating to Canada.
Fantastic. For me, when asked about a fun fact, I had to think about it. And what I, probably oversharing, but I got a real reliance on coffee, but I'm indecisive about how to prepare it. So if you come to my office, you'll see that we have an espresso machine, a pour over, a mocha pot. The only thing I've stopped short on is I haven't automated coffee making yet, maybe with a OpenShift IoT and an Ansible playbook to make a pot.
Use case.
But I'll get there one day.
All right. Fun fact about me. So first off, folks, it's David Jones, but everyone calls me Jonesy, so feel free because there's way too many Davids on the planet. So this just keeps it really easy. Fun fact, I like to collect things. I love to collect things. I started off by collecting watches, and then I graduated. I started collecting classic cars. That got really hard to collect because you can only fit so many of them inside of your garage and on your driveway before the family starts going, hey, this is a problem. But as I've gotten older, as I've matured, what I've started to collect that I really enjoy, bourbon.
Nice.
Very nice.
Very cool.
Awesome. Thank you, gentlemen. Now, I will say as well, by the way, that interviewing these individuals beforehand.
Hey, hold on. What about you, Corey? What's the fun fact about you?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh. Okay. So listen, everyone. I got a funny one if you want to hear it. And okay, well, you got no other choice now. I guess I'm on a roll. So whenever I see on a menu a chicken quesadilla, I can't help but giggle a little bit, no matter where I'm at in the world, and then I get a little bit of PTSD. So let me get into why that is. I'm born and raised in a small fishing village in Newfoundland. You'll get by the accent, by the way, when I get excited or have a few drinks in me. But anyway, in the late 80s, early 90s, Newfoundland wasn't known for its Mexican cuisine. So I'm aging myself a bit. In 1995, I moved from Newfoundland, small fishing village of 3,000 people, to Toronto. Loved every bit of it. Loved the people, loved the culture. It's amazing. And it still continues to be amazing, by the way. But anyway, I found myself 3 or 4 weeks in Toronto, and I went on a date with a lovely woman. And I asked her, I said, this is the first date I've been on with someone not from Newfoundland. It's the first time off the island. I said, where would you like to go? And she said, well, I have a Mexican restaurant that I really like. And I said, well, that sounds great. So she took me to her Mexican restaurant. And again, I'm not really known for, I didn't know at that time any of the cuisine. So I'm looking at the menu. She ordered what she ordered. The waiter looked at me and he said, what would you like, sir? And I said, well, I'll take the chicken quesadilla. And anyway, they said, pardon? I thought they just didn't hear me. So I said it a bit louder to make sure, I want the chicken quesadilla. And what's the problem? And so anyway, they said, listen, now why don't you point it out? So I did. And they said, oh, chicken quesadilla. So anyway, they laughed profusely. I think she resonated with the waiter very well. There obviously wasn't a second date, so hence the giggle and then the PTSD. Right, so. But anyway, we are going to get into the questions, and thank you for indulging me on that one. Thank you, Manav. But 2 things, by the way, with interviewing some of these individuals over the past few weeks. Michael Kennedy, by the way, likes to get into cryo chambers and freeze his buns off over a period of time. So thank you, Michael, for thawing yourself out and being here with us as well. And Manav, by the way, I know very well. You know, we work roughly for the same company. You know, Manav is probably the only C-level executive that I know that actually has Ansible Lightspeed with Watson Code Assist running on his laptop and uses it on a daily basis. So again, the What Expert panel, thank you again, gentlemen, for being here today. So let's get into the meat of it, everyone. With regards to questions, so Michael Kennedy, I'm going to pick on you first.
Okay.
So, you know, with regards to a high-level strategy within an organization, can you give an example of a best practice?
Well, at the risk of repeating what Walter shared,
Oh, don't repeat it.
Walter, you did a great job. Really, it's important that you take a look at your portfolio, understand it, assess it, and look for opportunities to have a great impact. Plan it, communicate it well, make sure everybody on the team understands the objectives that you have. And then when executing, start small, get a quick win, communicate the learnings broadly, ensure that you also communicate the creation and the value to your peers across your organization. Make sure you take advantage of the hub, Ansible Automation Hub, to share content and resources across your organization so that people aren't reinventing work that you've done. Really, it's about finding the greatest impact, getting early wins, and repeating that over time. For the executive, you know, you're improving your time to value and reducing your error rates. For the developer, you're able to move faster. For the operations team, once you start doing ops as code, you are reducing the number of times you're rustled in the night because the automation is taking care of your problems for you. Overall, and for the product owners, they're able to get an idea to market much faster because you're able to assemble the building blocks that you've created as a team quickly and deploy with confidence because you've already gone through all the exercises to ensure that you're delivering a quality product with reliability. So at a high level, you know, assess, find impact, start small, communicate broadly, iterate.
Yeah. Now, and I'll open up to the rest of the panel members as well. You keyed on something there that's small, start small and build on successes. Getting, you know, momentum in an organization and getting energy around that, specifically large organizations. You know, do you find that approach of starting small, building on wins and building on successes sort of gains momentum overall?
I know I do. You know, you often hear people say, start with an MVP, get going, demonstrate value as soon as possible. Because, I mean, let's face it, if you're not delivering value, what are you doing? So you have to identify the value quickly. And if you have missed the mark, you need to be able to course correct. So don't plan a multi-year project to miss, right?
And when you see organizations embark on that, on a strategy such as that, do you expect that strategy to ever end? Or do you think that's now has to be a part of their DNA of a constant evolution, continuous feedback loop, and now drive it home?
I don't think it ever ends. I think it's a continuous improvement and a feedback loop that goes into the future. And keying back to one of the things that Walter had shared in his earlier talk, you really, once you've hit your stride on your core systems, you can start looking around at the edge of the things that are really dragging your innovation and take advantage of some other opportunities to wrap some legacy systems and APIs, make sure that those are shared broadly across the organization, giving people the capability to then automate those endpoints as well. There's, I think, no end to the continuum. It's continuous.
Thank you.
Just that, I just sort of want to jump in here because, you both sort of hit, I think, one of the key themes of this is that start small. And in my experience working with many of you here in the audience, what we find is that it's these small, little, repetitive things that always crop up. These are the things that actually suck the time out of an organization. Where something you might think is something innocuous, like, for example, a disk filling up. That generates an alert that then goes into your ITSM system. Now you've got a whole team of people looking at that. Wouldn't it be nice to be able to go out and look for that type of condition that a disk is filling up and then be able to automatically resize it and not have that generate that ticket that gets pushed out into your ITSM system?
That's amazing. No, thank you, gentlemen. Great responses. So the next question, Manav, I'll put you on the spot here.
Sure.
I mean, we can't, specifically working with customers and looking at, product announcements, I mean, we can't get a day in without seeing or hearing about AI, at least 10 times a day. I mean, it's obvious it's going to change the way we work, change the way we live, et cetera. There's so much excitement around it. But in the context of automation, and specifically around generative AI, now for IBM and us, of course, at Red Hat, there is Ansible Lightspeed with Watson Code Assist that you're running. You're an expert right here. But where do you see organizations sort of look for generative AI solutions in the context of automation and see real value?
Oh boy. I think that's a great question. And I'm going to tie it to, there was a question in the room previously around the value of AI
Yes.
With regards to automation, or is the AI writing the automation? So if you take a step back, and I think Walter answered it quite well, at the grassroots level, at a very high level, when you're training a large language model, you certainly need to provide it a lot of data, a lot of context data, a lot of the script data, other domain data, whether it's incident data, whether it's data about your systems environments, the topology, connectivity, root cause failures that you might have happened in the past, so on and so forth. You take all that together, you put the model through pre-training, training, you'll do some security and defensiveness training in there, you'll do some downstream training and so on and so forth, and then you'll freeze the model weights and parameters, and here's your LLM. I think what's really interesting is once you now start looking at that, whether it's GPT 3.5, 4, Gemini, it's an endless list of models. There are many of these IBM created models as well now at this point. I think the lines of what the content is and what AI is generating are blurring. And let me give you some examples of how we are using this both internally and with our clients. So one of the things that we learned about 2 years ago in IBM is it's a big company, and there are many practitioners like me in sales, in tech sales, pre-sales, and engineering, and everybody needs an environment. I mean, the whole ubiquitousness with cloud is, give me a VM, give me a container, give it to me right now. I need it for the next 20 minutes, 2 months, few weeks, and so on. And then, by the way, nobody deletes them ever, right? They remain forever. So we were finding that our public cloud spend, IBM's included and third parties, because, hey, I want to test this particular configuration on this cloud for this client's environment and so on, it was over 100 million. So I'm being very cautious and careful as how much I share, because, maybe this is being recorded or not. Anyway, so it was well north of 100 million. So then we decided, okay, this is really not scalable. So let me give you a practical example one. Over the course of so this is middle of 2022 all the way to end of last year, we ended up re-architecting, re-engineering our internal private cloud that we call Tech Zone. Every IBMer that's here will know that. They all use it. So globally, 18,000 engineers, developers from IBM use it, either for internal purposes or for demo purposes. I think as of this morning, we are running over 300,000 pods in there. We have about 13,000 VMs across every cloud that you can think of, and on VMware on premises, including on the mainframe as well as Power. All of this managed, provisioned through Ansible. There is no way in hell we could do this without automation. We have built multiple layers of automation on top, and I can bore you with gory details on how we are doing, whether it's event-driven, how we're making better decision-making, how we're using observability and AI. I think we're now reaching a point where the next new runbooks that we have to write, we are no longer handcrafting them. So that brings me to Ansible Lightspeed with Watson Code Assist. The other thing that we're finding is as you have the proliferation of AI assistants to help assist develop code as an example, we can now have these assistants that are clever enough and smart enough that they can build pretty much an entire runbook for you. We're already seeing this today. We did a proof of concept with one of the large banks here in Canada for this purpose. So this is creating of playbooks. And I think it was a 5-6 week pilot. What they observed was some 60%, 62% reduction in time for them to create a runbook that was acceptable by their CIO team, their standards team, etc. A 2x reduction in failure rate. And anybody that's in sales, the projection was about $80 million of savings over a 3-year period. I mean, internally, we're seeing, crazy number of use cases when it comes to automation. Maybe I'll give you a couple more.
So, but man, thank you. We got about a minute and a half.
Sorry.
No.
Yeah.
So just so you know, everyone, each of these individuals can alone, they're so impressive, they can fill up an entire day with great content. So my apologies, by the way, but there's one use case that you mentioned to me that
Sure.
I think we got to get into. Just if you can do it in 90 seconds. It was the cruise ship use case where this is a cruise liner whereby they're looking at, by the way, they're not looking at just AI, they're looking at Manov to be with the captain for weeks on end at the cruise ship doing this work too, by the way. But sitting there, and the savings would be into the hundreds of millions of dollars just on 5%, but leveraging AI and automation on a cruise ship to basically bring real world savings. Can you just summarize that up in 90 seconds?
I think you did a really good job. So think of a
amazing.
cruise ship
Yeah.
as a city on the ocean. By the way, it's also a data center on the ocean because of the sheer amount of compute. So on the cruise ships, they have 3 drivers for cost: food, fuel, and people. Fuel being the number 1 driver. So their projection is if they can use AI, and actually, so that's one point. Point 2, so yes, they take weather data into account when they go from one port to another port, but in the middle of the ocean, there is no weather sensors. So they'll connect to the satellite and they'll get some information on an hourly basis. But when they actually chart the map, the path of the ship, it's back to the old maps and the information that the captain has and the second mate and first mate, etc. have. The idea here is use AI, both generative and automation, to optimize fuel reduction. And exactly as you said, the idea is use lots of these parameters and constraints, multivariate decision making here, some level of quadratic programming to reduce fuel consumption. Their stated target, and we're in early stages, we're seeing some promises. They would like to reduce 5% fuel consumption, and that indeed is hundreds of millions of dollars on one cruise liner.
So with that use case, think about that. One use case, leveraging AI, hundreds of millions of dollars of savings. It's amazing. So thank you very much, by the way, man. Very impressive. Thank you. So this next one, and by the way, everyone, don't worry about the time. Okay, I was told we've got 15 minutes we can go over. So we're not sort of, we don't need to rush it because there's some amazing content here as well. So David Jones, the holy grail of any infrastructure is self-healing. You touched on it a little bit, but that's been a promise now for years. With best of breed observability tools like Dynatrace, with what you do with event-driven Ansible, is self-healing IT right now? Is that a reality? And how do you use Dynatrace and Ansible to sort of bring real values in that context to customers?
It's a great question, and you know what? We're just at this amazing inflection point in the industry where what we're seeing is by being able to leverage things like observability. Actually, you know what? Before I go any further, I'm throwing around potentially jargon. How many people have heard of the term observability? Show of hands. Okay,
You're good.
Just about everybody. It's good. It's good. So, observability in its classic sense is the ability for us to be able to generate telemetry off of our applications. Typically, your things are going to be your metrics. It's going to be your traces. It's going to be your logs. We take it a little bit further at Dynatrace and we add in topology information, we add in metadata, we add in end user perspectives, code level insights. So from an observability standpoint in the industry, we're at a really, really interesting, as I mentioned, inflection point, because now we have partners like Ansible that actually, from our perspective, Dynatrace as an AI observability platform, we now have something more valuable to do. In the past, you would think of a platform like Dynatrace as, hey, there's a problem, we're going to generate a root cause analysis to tell you where that problem is. But now we can do something with that. Because in the past, it would typically, you would be like, here's a problem, let's fire off a ticket into our ITSM tool, right? But now the idea is, depending upon the nature of that ticket, we could actually have it potentially run an Ansible playbook. With Ansible event, with this new event-driven capabilities, we're thinking that it's going to go a lot further. So one of the things that we've now built into our platform is an observability-based workflow capability that allows us to chain to the Ansible workflows. So now we can actually, based upon having a common repository for all of that observability data. So I'm not going out to different sources. What we can do is we can generate essentially an answer that an event, something has happened. And now that we have that answer, and that answer is explainable, we can trust the system that that answer is what it says it is. So it's not like a typical sort of generative AI where we don't exactly know how it came to that conclusion. It came to an amazing conclusion, but we don't know how we got there. Our approach is, let's use the AI to provide an explainable answer. Once we've got that trust in that answer, now we can actually chain it to, drive a workflow off that. And what we can start to do is we can start having better decision trees within these workflows to allow us to actually, depending upon the conditions of this particular scenario, maybe trigger this action. Or if it's, if a parameter is set in a different way because this team needs to have it function in a certain way, then trigger a different action. And so from our standpoint, what Ansible is doing is super exciting. It just makes our platform that much more valuable. And in essence, it's going to make things much easier for your organizations to automate things. And just actually, quick question, show of hands. How many people are in the room here work at a bank or a telecom? So all of you folks, I know for pretty much certain you're either you are in fact using Dynatrace and you are using Ansible. Yeah. And coming up after this panel session, Rohan from BMO, and I'm just, no spoilers here, is actually going to show you a real world example of how they work together.
Yes, very impressive. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, the use case there, just to tie it off, so if you have something like ServiceNow at the top end of that, you can use Dynatrace, trigger the events into Ansible, correct, but then have the artifacts from a change management perspective close off that. The next day you come in, you look at everything that happened from a governance perspective, it's there, it's clean, 100%. You can audit, you can attest, you're good to go. No hands on keyboard.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. So we see scenarios now where people are using Dynatrace in combination with something like a ServiceNow and an Ansible to get to a condition where you see a build gets pushed out. Dynatrace detects that, hey, there's something wrong with this build because all of a sudden we're seeing a slowdown in a set of services. It provides the root cause of that analysis, but then is pulling information from the CMDB, from ServiceNow, pulling that information, tying off then that is actually run an Ansible playbook to help remediate that, and then closing that ticket off inside of ServiceNow. Human comes in the next day and goes, what happened overnight? Oh, and now I've got this whole explanation of what happened.
Wow.
Rather than, getting that, page in the morning that's 3 o'clock that's saying, hey, everything just went wonky.
Yes, that's, wow, very impressive. Thank you. Great responses.
My pleasure.
So everyone, last question before we get into the audience's Q&A. So again, I'm just going to remind you, please get your questions ready. We've got probably 8 to 10 minutes for you, Krishna. And by the way, Krishna, as I mentioned, is a technical specialist with Microsoft Azure. I had the pleasure of interviewing him a week or two ago, and his handle, by the way, in LinkedIn or his LinkedIn profile, it's just Krishna V. V is in Victor. And he wrote a blog and he posted about 2 days ago right now. And so I'm teeing him up here because I will tell you the question is just basically pumping up his blog. What I want him to do is just use this question to explain to everyone what he's written. But anyway, please connect with him, take a look at it. It was very educational, extremely well written, by the way, so impressive. But so I'll tee you up a little bit. In a client's hybrid cloud environment, how do you help organizations automate in that environment? We're playing T-ball here, by the way.
Okay.
Now it's like.
So thank you for everybody attending. It's so good to see a whole bunch of crowd here, which is nice to see after such a long time. See, if you take the Microsoft way of looking at things, then there are 3 key aspects of it: people, process, and technology. At the end of the day, this is a people-intensive business. We all have our challenges, but at the end of the day, this entire business runs through human beings. So that's people is the core part of this one. So if you see Microsoft, a lot of productivity tools, and everything we do around anything, it's basically centered around you as a developer or information worker, things like that. So people is a key part of this one. Second is process. Process could be internal process, external processes, or something in between. So this is where the patterns and practices comes into play. Again, people are going to play a major role, like partners like Dynatrace as well as Arctic. They help you with automating some of these processes. The last piece is technology, because I put in the last piece of technology. You need to have these people and process ready to take advantage of the technology pieces on it. If you think about it, Azure, Microsoft has got tons of technologies, including our partner ecosystem, Ansible, Dynatrace. So I would touch page 3 on this thing. You can look at the blog I wrote. One is the Ansible as a tool and technology I've seen has grown massively over the last few years. Most of my customers, what we educate them to do is configuration management, day 2 operations, day 1 operations. You automate to the maximum possible extent so that you have better sleep patterns, plus you also make sure things are doing fine, right? The second, within Azure ecosystem, we have things like Azure Automate, which helps you to automate pretty much regular mundane jobs, and also the hybrid worker roles, which basically can run on-premise on the cloud, and there are in-between things. This is where Ansible is like a tie-in for everything in. Things like Dynatrace, I started seeing more and more. It's sort of becoming a standalone product to a platform by itself. So a customer taking in, we have worked with Arctic on a number of projects. So long story short, it's people that help them to empower them with all the tools, technologies, and enable the processes by having pre-built patterns. And the last one is use the technology which you're comfortable with and then start building on it. I like the concept of starting small. Most of my projects started with the Hello World. It's a cliche term, but you always start with the simplest, the smallest automation you can do. It could be creating a log, so creating a virtual machine, creating a network. I always start with the smallest thing, and given all the Copilot thing, you don't even write any code, you can just type it in. So does that cover the things that you want to do, or?
No, absolutely amazing. I mean, and by the way, your blog does it all.
Thank you.
You can read it whenever you like. So thank you. Thank you.
Shameless plug, Krishna V, and then you can. I do write on a lot of technologies, mostly on the lighter part of it. Yeah.
No, that's amazing. No, thank you. So one thing though, I'll just add to that a little bit, because it was like a reunion coming here with some of my ex-BlackBerry colleagues. And during the growth of BlackBerry, we would run these very complex services, and we'd consistently be running at capacity and then have to scale. We're in the data center at night. We're writing Python and Ruby code to automatically do these things. But in today's world, with Dynatrace, with Microsoft Azure, with what we're doing here with Ansible, of course, you have a world where you hit a capacity threshold, or if your number of subscribers or users get to a certain point, you can trigger events and fully replicate your environment throughout. You put infrastructure as code in your GitHub repository, GitLab repository. Okay, you have a major catastrophe. You can rebuild that environment, not from a state perspective, I get it, but from a stateless perspective, you can rebuild that in seconds. No problem at all. Right? And that's the true value of what we're doing here around these observability tools, AI, a public cloud. I mean, if we can get COTS-based companies to sort of build their software that way, or if we can get into the vernacular of organizations to build code that's basically agnostic of the underlying platform, deals with state horizontally, I mean, it's real world now, and it's amazing. So with that, thank you, gentlemen. It's amazing. So I appreciate you again being here. So everyone, I've been told we got 15 minutes after the 45, by the way. So I see in the time here, we've got 12 minutes left. Why don't we move over now to taking questions from the audience. We have Vijay and Derek with the mics. And I'm sorry, by the way, for this end here. You guys, you can't really see me while I'm talking, or half the stage. But anyway, I'll stand up. So questions? Well, we got 15 minutes and we're not leaving, so.
That's good. Can you hear me? Yeah? Okay.
Given that we have a lot of planned maintenance, right? Planned maintenance or planned automations that happen within our organizations. We look at things like disaster recovery exercises we do on a regular basis. How do we look in the future and rationalize between planned automation executions to our observability tools? Because today we still chase our tails, right? So if we're going to run an automation that's going to do some sort of failover, or we're going to flip to a different data center, we're going to do a disaster recovery, our automation tools don't really know that that's what's happened. And so production support people might have to chase that and say, oh, why am I getting this message? Do we have something in the future where we look to say, how can we tie our observability to observe our automation platform?
Who would like to take that?
That's a great question, Dave.
Yeah, Dave.
Almost felt like it was planted there for a bit, but no. So this is super interesting. I just came off a couple of conversations lately that when I say we're at an inflection point where things are really going to accelerate and change, I really do mean it. The observability information now has a richness to it that allows us to actually see and perceive the way that our applications are running in a way that we just fundamentally hadn't done in the past. In the past, it was all up-down type monitoring, right? But now we can actually go in and we can look at payloads, we can look at conditions, we can understand what's happening at a much deeper level. Where I see in my, based upon these conversations I've been having is, one of the real benefits of using these large language models is to start turning it on to understand what are organizations doing right now in terms of, reacting to issues. All of our organizations, if you work in a large organization, you're probably using some ITSM tooling. You probably have a wealth of information of alerts that are coming in, and then how you're responding to it. I would say that now is the time to start turning on those large language models onto that data set.
Yep.
And what is it telling us in terms of how do we react? And I have a feeling that gives us, I think, the stepping stones for the next step of what you were asking. And that is, here's all of this information about what our current ticket landscape looks like. Here's our actions to remediate those tickets. Now let the LLM figure out, what would make sense in terms of what's the next thing that we should be automating. How do we automate it? That type of thing. That's from my perspective where I see it going.
100%, or predicting what's the impact is going to be. So, not to shamelessly plug the IBM portfolio, but what we're trying to do in our AIOps tools, and by the way, the industry at large, this is what they're trying to do. Exactly, Jonesy, where you're going, which is you have all this rich data, the topology info, the historical info about incidents as an example, all the event data, all the metrics, all the sensor data that you have. Why can't I give this to some kind of a large language model? And there are all sorts of techniques available now, right? Especially with fine-tuning techniques that are there, where very quickly you can get an out-of-the-box model that you tailor to your environment. So then it knows that, okay, historically, based upon these type of changes that you made, this is what the impact was. And now you can do an impact assessment before you do a release. I think that's where the world is going. So before you push a major change or the planned maintenance that you're talking about, how big of an impact is it, right? Now, it's in its early stages right now, right? We've done many a pilot with highly promising results. I'm sure others might have some other, mileage that they might have received, but that's exactly where the industry is going.
I'm going to build off that a little bit because you keyed on something here with disaster recovery. So would it be possible to, again, if everything is as code, point that code base, redeploy an exact image of what you're running today, use then AI tools to generate similar load that you would see, and then would that attest to the validity of the DR test itself? And then so you're not basically doing a flip over and a flip back, but it's a real world test based on an AI model.
That's a really good example, because I got to tell you, a lot of times when people are out there doing that type of testing, they're testing it based upon, I think the scenario looks like this. And they're not actually putting into it, what have we actually seen in the past? Where are those single points of failure that we hadn't considered? Because I'm doing my testing not on production, but I'm doing it on something that I say is like production. That's right.
And it's never the same, right?
No,
it's never
the
exactly
same. No.
But you made a very good point. So what we are starting to see already is the use of LLMs for synthetic data generation.
Yes.
To model or mimic, here's what my production environment looks like. So to be as close, Jonesy, to your point, as production as possible. Are they packaged together today in a complete solution? No, but I think the piece parts are all there. So you'll see that's where the industry is going to go.
George, just want to.
You have a cookbook for that. You talk about Dynatrace. I understand. You can do event, whatever. You talk about. It's okay. So, sorry, I will ask a question for all five of you because you are aligned. Corey, I know that you work on BlackBerry, and nice to see you back, anyhow. And I see the Arctic, so I see the integrator in this. I see Dynatrace. Do you have a cookbook for that, or you told us, which are 500 of us, or you can do that? And because I'm sick and tired on that one, or you can do that. Do you have a cookbook so we can do it? It will help you sell your product. It will help us implement it. It will help us sell it to the customer. Just telling us you can do that, ServiceNow and whatever, is not there, right? Yeah. Sorry. It's a question.
So I will say, and I have some personal experience on this, and sorry, and I want to get into, I'm the moderator, but I got to jump on this one. I will say from a landscape point of view, or how you look at things, I personally, designing complex systems at BlackBerry, very large, we had the best success when we, as software developers, looked at the software and we dealt with failure cases ourselves. We took responsibility. What I'm saying that is, I would never, at this point in my career, look to infrastructure or look to a generic cookbook to do anything for me but in exactly what I wanted, that I'm in control. So if you can write applications that basically you deal with your use cases as you see fit, all this stuff is possible. But to say that can an operator or a piece of hardware or something deal with your corner cases and all use cases, I've been sold that dream in the past. We've implemented, and you've probably been seeing CNN a bunch of times where a bunch of people in this room have been on incidents. It doesn't work, right? So my thing is, it has to be a partnership with your developers. It has to look at use cases. If you can do the failure cases, you can do the scaling cases in software, then you can take in tools to basically observe, and you're in control, and then it can take action. You can utilize Ansible, you can utilize the public cloud, you can utilize an AI to do some really interesting things. But out of the box, the capabilities are there, but I think we need to elevate the responsibility up to the software developers when we have the control. And I'm sorry, gentlemen, I had to take that one. Please, go ahead.
Yeah, I was actually going to answer your question in a second, but I also want to go back to Dave's question just real quick, which was the perspective. Now, I don't know the circumstances that you're dealing with in your organization, but I would want to maybe elevate the discussion a little bit more towards the customer's experience with your systems rather than the technical implementation details. Using tools like Dynatrace, you can actually get a full spectrum view into the customer's actual experience with the service that you're managing. And as long as that customer experience is great, the details underneath on how it's implemented are malleable. And I don't know if that helps answer your question. There's a little bit of bumps and things that you do, but if you're prioritizing your actions based on your service consumer's experience, you're going to have a good time.
And Krishna also was about to jump in as well.
Oh, yeah.
Something I want to make sure.
Dave, I just want to touch base on, so we worked with one of the largest retailers where they had this doing critical days and things like that. They had massive issues in terms of backups not working, too many logs coming in and things like that. What we did is we took observability data from different sources for the last couple of years. It's not a perfect model. We pumped that into an OpenAI model and then came up with, hey, these are things you should do. All you end up doing is creating a FAQ document. It's not the perfect thing in the world, but I think understanding, we took the backup schedule, we even found out whether even these backups are necessary to be taken every day, or we can, optimize it accordingly. What we learned is during critical days, the optimal backup would be like every 2 hours, and that all reduces the operational cost. So what we started using LLM models to understand more about the past events, and then not predict the future, but at least make things easy at the ground level. Hopefully in the future, say, as models become, now the customer has got a model to improve on and then slowly grow on it. So we are looking at things like optimizing day 2 operation, reducing the cost, as well as understanding what the future state could be. LLMs have helped us a lot, so that's where we are going towards.
Nice. Thank you for that.
And to get back to the other question about building blocks, are there patterns? Absolutely. Using automation is a collaborative experience. With our organization, we'll embed with a product team, understand their circumstance, and help them build reusable patterns specifically for the things that are within their specific domain. And as an example, we might use Ansible to automate the Dynatrace monitoring for a deployment as it's being deployed, so that the product is being deployed with all of the relevant monitoring already there. And it's a variable templated pattern that is repeatable, so that monitoring with Dynatrace isn't an afterthought. It goes with the release. It's really quite powerful. And then just iterating on that, building more momentum, doing operations as code, and delivering that alongside.
So it's interesting. It goes right back to what we're talking about first thing in the morning in the keynote, right? We talk about, we've got this ecosystem that allows it to go both ways. And, configuration as code. Well, configuration of your applications, but also configuration of your observability are all options, right? So if you are, using these large language models, you could point them to this set of data to actually go back and potentially configure how you're, what you're going to be looking at, what the thresholds should be that we're looking at. There's that's why I'm so excited about this, and why I say we're at this just amazing inflection point, in the industry that we've just simply not been at in the past. We've talked about it. We've been talking about self-healing for years.
Decades.
But now we're at this point where, hey, all of those component building blocks to make this thing happen, it's there.
That's amazing. So everyone, we've got time for one more question, and then before we're going to close up. Perfect.
Hi, thank you. Dave, I completely agree with you. No matter how we are proud of our innovation for a product, when you go to the after GA, head into the production, most of the time it's complete story, different story, right? So my question is for Manar. Okay, so AI capability to helping the automation plays significant role right now. We all aware of that. Can you advise how you help the customer to select the proper model for different domain? For instance, like the gentleman say, well, my IT operation needs certain support to help me to speed up, to detect animals and also the situation will causing the production trouble, right? At the other side, supply chain, that's another domain. Okay, business impact is another domain. Financial capable planning, this is another domain. How you can advise us what kind of model when we select it. When we select, no matter it's a commercial product or no matter it's open source. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I think that's a great question. So if I paraphrase, the question is, how do we select the right large language model for our use case, right? Okay, I'm going to try to summarize. So it's a great question. It's a question sometimes of people are writing their master's thesis on this question, by the way, to be clear. And as you said in your question, there are two options. There is I'll call it a closed source model, which may be a state-of-the-art model or an open source model. But let's take a quick step back. Where the world started about 18 months to 2 years ago, where everybody thought the bigger the model, the better it's going to be. And the model size is measured on something called parameters, where think of a parameter as a tunable knob, options, switches, and dials that you can change. 175 billion for GPT 3.5. GPT-4, they don't disclose it, but it's 8 different models, each with 220 billion parameters. You do the math. Now you're going to trillions of parameters and so on. How do you select the right LLM for your use case? One, it's going to come down to how much control you have on that model. In other words, you're going to take a model, OpenAI, Google, Microsoft, IBM, open source models. You can build your own model, by the way. I have a model that I built. It took me forever on my Mac, as an example. That model prints Shakespeare. It makes no sense, but it prints Shakespeare, as an example. So you can get models. So what do you want to do with that model? How much can you trust the model? So every large language model in the world today gets trained on pretty much similar data set. One of the most common data sets is this Common Crawl, C4 data set, which is basically a crawl of last 17 years of internet data. What we found in IBM as an example when we started training our own models is turns out that that data set has, apart from hate, profanity, and abuse, it has copyrighted books. It has information from far-right websites. It has access to content that you should not have access to, quite frankly. So you have to then look at the supply chain of that model. So can you trust the data set? So the next thing that becomes, okay, do you have visibility and transparency into that data, into the data set of that model? Fourth question that you run into, so many people raise their hands about, those that work in banks and telcos. So if you're working in a regulated industry, can you explain how the model is making the decisions that it's making, right? And then, so these would be the top four, I'll say, options. Once you take any single model, you're going to apply a whole bunch of techniques. I'm sure everybody's heard of prompt engineering because there was so much noise about it, which is a static set of words you give to the model, but you'll have to do something to that model to make that model work in your scenario. The second big term I would submit that almost everybody should have heard of is prompt tuning or fine tuning. Let's call it fine tuning, right? So you're going to take the model, you're going to give it some of your own data, and you'll get that model to work. The final thing that you're going to need is cost. The larger the model, the more hardware, more GPU you're going to require. The backlog for NVIDIA GPUs right now is 55 weeks, right? And with the bigger the model, the more costly it's going to be. So if you put those 5 things together, find a model that you can trust. Hopefully it's open source, so it gives you lots more transparency. You're able to monitor that. You might require a governance tool, whether from IBM or any other vendor, so that you can govern the model. You can detect if the model is sending out content that is copyrighted, that has hate, profanity, abuse, is it leaking PII data? And then you can use that model for your use case. I hope it somewhat does justice to that question, but that's the journey that we are on. I have written books and articles about it. We can happily share that and find me somewhere and we can have a conversation. Awesome. And apologies, I tried to summarize it as
No, that was amazing.
Do we have time just to add a little bit, because there was a second part to your question, and the second part to your question was talking about how do we work this in relation to things like supply chains, as an
So
example.
Dave, just so you know, to answer your question, let's take 90 seconds.
Okay.
If you can do it in that,
You can do it in 90 seconds. Okay.
Let's do it.
So this is where I'm so excited about this inflection point between observability, AI, automation. You probably don't realize this, but in that observability telemetry that you all have access to, there is actually business data that you can tease out. So there is payloads that are being passed back and forth across these transactions, across the messages, that's being captured by your observability data that can be pulled out. And then that could then be used to enhance those large language models. And that's in 90 seconds, what I wanted to do is tie in the second part of your question, that you do have access to that information and it can be used in combination with these AI developments that we have now.
Awesome. No, thank you very much for that. And everyone, you've been a great audience, by the way. Thank you again for being here. But listen, before we let our panelists go, I got some fun rapid fire questions for you.
Oh boy.
So, Manav, what is a nickname you're known for? What is one of them?
I think the one that I'm really known for is being a nerd.
Okay.
And I carry that badge with honor.
See, I got to tell you, behind the scenes, I refer you to as the man of AI. So, anyway, that's just it. So, David, what story do you tell most often?
I can't share that with the public audience. No, absolutely not. There's no way. The second story I'll talk about, though, real quickly is, I'm coming up on 30 years in this industry, and honestly, folks, I feel like I'm living in a world of science fiction.
Yeah.
Right? Like what we can do, what you folks do for me, because I can sit on my couch, I can pull open my phone, I can do my banking while watching a baseball game. In a million years, I never would have thought we'd be here. So that's my story.
That's awesome. Great one. Thank you. Michael, have you ever written a song for someone?
I'm not a terribly musical person, so I haven't written a song, but every live band I see that takes requests, I ask them to play Black Sabbath Iron Man.
Nice.
And the very first ChatGPT prompt, I asked it to write me a song about unrequited love. Yeah.
This is the new world we're in. What song you've written for someone? I let ChatGPT do it, and then it just does all the work. There you go. Wow. So last one, Krishna. What is your hidden talent?
I'm not sure the hidden talent, but now hopefully I would never expected to translate a Hollywood movie to a Tamil movie with all the dialogues. So let's see how the movie comes out.
Nice. So your hidden talent is still technology, use it in different areas. There you go.
It.
That's awesome. So everyone, let's give it a round of applause for our panel members. So.
Well, that was a fun close to that panel. All right. So our next session is going to make a lot of these concepts real. We're about to hear from Rohan Shah, who's a Senior Manager of Site Reliability Engineering at the Bank of Montreal. Rohan is going to tell us about self-healing auto remediation in Dynatrace automation workflows using Ansible. So here we go.
So welcome everybody. Thank you, Walter, for introducing me. Good morning, and my name is Rohan Shah, and I'm a Senior Manager of the SRE Team Center of Excellence and Innovation at the Bank of Montreal. And today we'll be presenting the auto remediation with Ansible and Dynatrace. So a quick introduction on the next slide about the SRE teams that we have here at the bank. Then we'll be talking about the auto remediation itself. So what is configuration as code? What are the benefits of configuration as code that actually build the foundation for us to implement the self-healing and the auto remediation? And then of course at the end we'll have a demo so that you guys can see, which David was referring to there, where you can see the actual Dynatrace and Ansible in action and view the benefits that we actually get from this. So now, before we get into the CAC and the observability stuff, just taking a step back and defining what is SRE. Site reliability engineering, as defined by Google years ago, is simply put software engineering approach to your IT operations. Essentially, it is codifying your environments using the DevOps best practices. And it's to standardize your environments so you can make them more reliable and resilient. Essentially, that's what SRE is. Now that we know the definition of what SRE is, let's talk about the work streams. So there are multiple work streams in the bank, and there's multiple SRE teams across the bank. Two of them that we co-lead with another manager, Kevin, who is not here today, is configuration as code and observability. So Kevin himself leads the configuration as code work stream in the bank, and his team helped build the framework for what I'm presenting here today. And myself, I run the observability team for the North American commercial banking system. So a lot of the treasury payment solutions, a lot of the commercial banking, a lot of the credit risk teams, that's where we support them for their observability solutions using Dynatrace and Ansible put together. So what is configuration as code? I already said the definition of what SRE is. So just building on top of that, it's a framework developed to manage your configuration data. Now, by codifying the environment, which is what the SRE framework is supposed to be for, we are able to now treat these virtual machines as if they are OpenShift pods and containers. So imagine spinning up and down your pods, how easy it is for you to do that. You can do the same thing for your virtual machines. Doesn't matter if it is on-prem virtual machine or it's an EC2 instance sitting in AWS. You can do that using configuration as code framework. And it allows you to introduce immutability into the infrastructure itself. Now, using the CAC framework, it actually allows you to configure a lot of things. So let's start at the base. Imagine you have your engineering team that actually gets you a virtual machine with a vanilla operating system installed. Now, on top of that, you need to configure your operating system, which for us, mostly the standard is the Red Hat Linux operating system. So you need to configure the operating system. Then you need to install your binaries of the middleware on top of it. So we are an IBM shop, so a lot of our middleware is either the HTTP servers, the WebSpheres, or the MQs from IBM. On top of that, you need to configure the middleware to allow the application layer to be deployed on top of it. And then on top of that, you deploy your application configuration data. So if you look at it, all in all, this framework can actually provide you the full stack configuration management and have that deployed as an immutable infrastructure, a stateless immutable infrastructure in your environment. Now, with the use of Ansible collections recently in the last few months that we have switched, it has actually made our life much more easier. So we originally used to have these products, as I mentioned, so the operating system, the IBM HTTP servers, WebSpheres, as our repository deployed on GitHub, which people could just clone the repository and then actually use there in their work. But without the Ansible collections, every time they had to clone the repo, that adds more overhead, that adds more code management. With the use of collections, all they have to do is now just call the collections itself from the repository, the main code framework, and then they can fill in the information in their own repository and just use the standard code base. What this does is, it actually allows a guaranteed standard code base for everybody to use. And it reduces the overhead of managing the code again and again for different products that are being deployed as part of this framework. Now, there are many, many benefits that come from using configuration as code. Many of them are mentioned on the left of the page there. One of them being idempotency. That is one of the things that we should aim for, is that even having to manage a lot of configuration data, having it deployed again and again, it's still remaining in the same desired state. Is to make sure that we are in that desired state as long as we want it to be. There is, of course, automation and orchestration, agile provisioning. One of the big ones, and it's a big DevOps buzzword in the industry, is to have a CI/CD pipeline deployed. And now, because you have your whole environment codified, you're actually able to deploy these CI/CD pipelines. For us, it's either Git Actions or Azure DevOps. And you're able to deploy your infrastructure like it is a part of an application code through a CI/CD pipeline as part of all the stages of your SDLC, making life much more easier in general to manage your configuration and manage your environment. And you can imagine, it's a bank, thousands of virtual machines, big data centers. The environment is huge for us to manage. Now, two of the big benefits that we will be talking about here and making sure it's the things that actually laid the foundation for what I'm presenting as auto-remediation are drift detection and self-healing. So let's talk about what is drift first. For a moment, we'll just stop for a second and talk about the definition. Drift, it's an undocumented or unapproved change that is happening in an environment, and that is called the configuration drift. Basically, it is deviating from the baseline that you want your environment to be at, and that's a drift. It can cause significant application performance issues, or it can also even have security implications in the environment, and that can happen even through just a simple human error, or it can happen through some malicious activity in the environment. Now, how do we catch that drift? How do we report on that drift? That is where the drift detection service comes into picture. It is mission critical, as Walter said before, to be able to catch these drifts and maintain your configuration as code. And for that, we actually introduced a service called driftdetector.sh. It was built by one of our lead DevOps engineers who's sitting in the crowd right there, Alex, and he built the service where what this does is that it actually runs on a burst time. Every few seconds, it keeps running on the environment, and it's deployed as part of the CSE framework. So all the configuration data that is managed using this framework, it will actually go in and keep checking if there is a drift detected. So if there's a drift that is going off the baseline, if there's an undocumented or unapproved change, it will actually log it into a log file. Now, there's two things that go in that log file. One, the name of the file that is actually drifted, of course, because that's probably the most important part of this. Second is to have the audit information about that file. So you want to know the timestamp of that file when drifted, and also the location of the file, so you can quickly find out what's happening and where it's happening. Now, this is the junction where the two work streams come together, configuration as code and observability, where Dynatrace and Red Hat and Ansible, they all come together, where we move into that next innovative step of how do we get to self-healing, how do we get to auto-remediation. Now, moving on to the next slide. There we go. So as part of the phase one of the Dynatrace integration, what we did is, with the launch of the new Dynatrace version just last year, the first step was that we have this log file that we know that contains a lot of drift data. We ingested that drift log file in Dynatrace, and we started building a dashboard out of it. That, okay, let's just visualize what the drift looks like first. So on the left, you see there's 17 problems open, and there's 26 hosts that are drifted out of the 338 hosts today that are on the CSE framework. Now, the people from BMO sitting in the audience, don't worry, this is not production environment. Nobody's going to page you. You don't have to run back to work. This is our non-production environment. We can fix it tomorrow, maybe Monday. Enjoy the weekend. But that's what it is. So that's the active drift environment, drift problems that are showing on the dashboard. Now, the table beside it is actually showing you a detailed breakdown of the problems that are open in the environment. I apologize in advance for having to blur these out because, of course, it's BMO internal data, so I can't just put it out there. But the time series chart right below it is actually visualizing the drift for you. So it's actually showing and calculating the drift percentage in the environment of a specific host group, so basically your application group. And then it's showing that going up and down over time, or if it's basically at your baseline, which is 0%. Now, the most favorite table in this dashboard for me is the one at the bottom. Why is it most favorite? Because using Dynatrace's query language, on the read, on the go, I'm able to parse the data, put it into different formats that I see need, and put that on the dashboard. And what this table is telling me is which host, the first column that is blurred out, is actually the name of the hosts that have the drift on them. And then also the ones beside it is telling me which files have drifted. As part of the drift detection, the service actually is checking a number of files. So it's telling me how many files it's checked on that specific host, and how many of those files have drifted. And then, of course, as part of that, we're doing a quick mathematical calculation and just putting the drift percentage on the screen. So as part of the phase one, as I mentioned, it's a quick snapshot, a quick view into the environment on the current state. What drifts exist, where do they exist, and which files are they on, and which hosts are they on. Now, why do we use Dynatrace? So a lot of people might have had discussion that there are many other logging tools out there, but why Dynatrace specifically? So Dynatrace is our standard APM tool in the bank. And for all of our application performance monitoring purposes, we use Dynatrace today. That also includes a lot of the infrastructure monitoring for Linux has been moving on to the Dynatrace platform. It makes sense to use Dynatrace because it is already a standard in the bank. It is much more closer to the source of the data, which allows us to quickly detect the problems and also gather all the event data that we need in a one-stop shop situation, and help us reduce that mean time to resolution, which is the goal of the problem anyways. Like at the end of the day, that's all we want to do is reduce the mean time to resolution, reduce that blast radius that affects our clients, and bring it to as low as possible, if 0. All right, so getting to the main topic of the hour, auto-remediation. Now, this is the current state of auto-remediation at Bank of Montreal. So walking through the workflow itself. You look at on the left, there's the application monitor. That is basically the Dynatrace. That's where the flow starts. It actually goes from there and sends an alert to ServiceNow when it detects a problem. ServiceNow is our event management tool at the bank. And ServiceNow goes through a little bit of algorithm and checks and says that, hey, okay, there's a certain level of problem. It meets certain factors. And actually, just for ease of words, this framework in the bank today is called Sense and Response. So as part of the Sense and Response framework, there are some factors, predefined factors in ServiceNow that say that, hey, if a problem comes up with these kind of details, you're supposed to kick off a Sense and Response playbook. And what it will do as part of this is it will trigger an Ansible playbook from that ServiceNow incident. It will go in and then try and fix the problem. Once it fixes the problem, well, once the playbook is completing its run, it comes back to ServiceNow and says, did I fix the issue? If yes, it will update, close the incident, and then go back to its BAU state of monitoring. If it did not, it will update the incident with the information on why the playbook run failed. It will remove itself as an automated mechanism and give it to the security operations team, which is basically our SOC team that does 24/7 monitoring of the incidents, and then they will page out the respective L2 and L3 support teams. So that's how the current flow of this looks like. If you look at this for a second, there's nothing wrong with this. This is actually a great flow. So why did we do the POC for Dynatrace, or using the Dynatrace tool and using the new Ansible? To understand that, we'll have to take a step back to understand the challenges in this current state. So it's the same workflow, but just go in a couple steps behind. The first box on the left that you see is the alerting workflow. So let's talk about drift. We've been talking about configuration as code and drift detection for the last few minutes. So we'll use that as an example. Configuration as code framework has been applied in the bank for the last 2 years. We have been slowly operationalizing it. And then in the last 6 to 8 months is where we have started to really operationalize it in our end non-production environments and into production environments. So drift is now a new alert pattern that is showing up in our problem detection scenarios. So in the first box, we see that there's a new pattern showing up, go into ServiceNow, and then we start pulling a ServiceNow report. And we see that, hey, there's this pattern showing up a few times a week or different environments getting affected. We should build something for this to auto-remediate. We know what the problem is. Can we proactively try and solve the problem before it gets to that stage of having a bigger blast radius? So for that, we go to the second box on the right, which is application dev teams, platform engineering team, and an Ansible playbook. What does this box do? So in here, we have the platform engineering team, which is basically the ServiceNow team that has the ability to develop these new patterns on the platform. We have the application dev teams. So the drift exists in different environments, but every application is different. Every application has a different behavior, and you cannot just simply deploy the playbook again and solve the problem. Every playbook has to be defined in a custom manner to address a different drift for a different application. This is where different application dev teams work with the platform engineering team to develop that new pattern that they want for sense and response. What's the problem with that, though? There's hundreds of support teams in the bank, one platform engineering team in the bank, though. So now, from having to identify a new pattern, designing it, documenting it, deploying it, testing it, validating it, getting it approved, and putting it into production, we're looking at about 12 to 16 weeks. And that's on a happy path scenario. On a happy path where we know everything will work normally, no issues faced, and in about 12 to 16 weeks, we will have a new pattern deployed on the ServiceNow platform, and we will have a sense and response framework ready to go. So while we know what the problem is, while we have the experts on hand to solve the problem, we are limited by the capacity to build it out and deploy it in a much faster manner. This is where the Dynatrace and Ansible POC comes into the picture. So this is what the future state POC looks like. This is the current POC that we have been testing and building out in the last 3, 4, 6 months maybe. Well, I started this last year myself, and I've been building this out, and then we had Dynatrace work with Ansible to release their new Dynatrace action blocks, which we'll of course get to in the video in the next slide. So in the next slide, you'll get to see actually how the Ansible is kicked off using the Dynatrace automation workflows that David was talking about. So this is where we have this workflow going on for the last six months-ish. And what you see here is that instead of having 2 big boxes and 2 different steps and having these challenges to get to the actual problem, Beforehand, now we have a much more decentralized model. So the decentralized model, what it does is, instead of us all having to go to one platform engineering team to start, develop, and document everything, we still follow the same processes of documenting, designing, and getting the approvals and whatnot. But instead, the development of this is much more decentralized. The application development team, who are the experts themselves in these environments, can actually go and develop the auto remediation themselves. They don't actually have to go and wait in a big backlog and try and solve the problem. So on an average now, with the use of this POC and what we have tested in the last few months, any new pattern for drift patterns that we will identify using configuration as code, we can actually develop this in less than 4 weeks. So from having to wait from 12 to 16 weeks, we can have this decentralized model of just having this deployed in less than 4 weeks. And of course, tested and deployed. So what happens next after this? Now, this is where once the platform deployment happens and we have an automation workflow already put in Dynatrace, the same workflow kicks in. We have the application monitor go off, and then that actually goes in and sends the alert to Dynatrace workflows. So instead of sending to ServiceNow in the previous slide, we're sending it to Dynatrace workflows. And we're telling Dynatrace workflows that, hey, while I do want to create an incident as part of my ITSM governance practices, I want to kick off the Ansible playbook at the same time. I don't want to wait for that one thing to run while I do the other thing. It doesn't have to be in series. It can be in parallel. And that's what we're doing. So we are kicking off an Ansible playbook as part of the workflow, and then following the same process again. Is it resolved? If yes, update and close the incident. If it is not, update the incident, let the SOC team know, and then they'll page out the respective L2 and L3 support teams. Now, there's two big benefits that come out of this, as I mentioned. So now, instead of having to wait for a problem to happen and then identify a pattern, we can actually have this baked right into the SDLC, so the developers can actually use this to develop their own auto remediation plans as part of the deployment lifecycle, which makes it much more future-proof. And then the other thing that comes, which is the bigger thing that comes as part of the phase 2, is the EDA, event-driven automation from Ansible. As I mentioned, drift can be very complex in different environments, and you cannot just remediate the drift by deploying the last state again. You have to be careful how you approach that drift, what components to take off offline, deploy the new package again, and then bring it back online. So having different scenarios, EDA is built for this more complex solution. So we will be, as part of phase 2 in summer, we will be building this new logic out in EDA to tackle drifts on all fronts, and then have that deployed as part of the Dynatrace automation workflow. So without further ado, I'll get to the demo, and we will have the team play the video there, so just give it a second to load. Perfect. So what you're seeing on the screen right now is the same dashboard that I presented before. It's the same dashboard that is showing one host that has drifted and one problem that is open. It is our sandbox virtual machine, and it's showing you right on the side that there's the limits.configuration file that has drifted right now, and there's about 5.86% of drift in the environment. You can see that in the time series chart there as well, that there is an active drift showing in the environment. What would happen is, this, as soon as it gets logged, we will actually kick off an Ansible, Dynatrace workflow. And as you see, we're pressing the play button right there. You see there's two boxes beside each other. So what are these two boxes doing? Even though we know there's a drift problem that is existing, we are using these two boxes in Dynatrace to actually verify that the drift exists. So it's comparing the previous time slot to the current time slot, and it's checking if the drift does exist. Once it verifies the drift is there, it actually goes and deploys this Ansible playbook box. So what it does is that it actually is going and calling a playbook that we have predefined in Ansible and saying that, hey, there's a drift on this host and this file, deploy the Ansible playbook. Then it comes back and waits. It takes about 60 seconds for the playbook to run, so we wait in Dynatrace as the timer goes off, and then goes back to Ansible to get a response back saying what happened. How did this work properly? Now, if the drift was resolved, it takes about 30 seconds for the new drift detector.log file to update, and for Dynatrace to ingest that log file in Dynatrace, and for us to query that data point and check if the drift was actually resolved. And that's what's actually happening here. So it's actually waiting for the drift to be remediated, put in the log file saying that the drift is gone, and then the Ansible playbook itself calling saying it's completed. That's where the automation workflow ends. And as you see on the screen, it is actually showing you the playbook that has run. So it is showing you the playbook that just got executed as part of the drift automation workflow, and some more details around that playbook right here, which just gives you a little bit more insight into what we actually ran as part of the automation workflow. What it will show you on just in a second, right there, is there's no more problems open, no more drifted host, and as you see at the end of that time series chart, there is a drop. There's basically the line has gone, so that means the drift has remediated and it's at 0, and that's what we want our baseline to be always at. That is the end of the demo. As part of the future state, we will be actually looking to implement this more, as I said, with EDA, so have more complex scenarios of drift and as part of the Dynatrace workflows. Yeah, we'll see where it goes. That's the end of my presentation. If there's any questions, I'll open it up.
Yeah, that was a great presentation. Just a quick question. Would you be able to give some example from your real life projects about triggering the automation Ansible playbooks when you got the incident? Like what type of Ansible playbooks you were triggering from your system setup?
So from Dynatrace itself, or in general, are you asking from?
From Dynatrace.
Okay, so
automatically incidents are closed. That's what you've shown here.
Yeah.
So for that, you have to trigger some Ansible playbook that will fix the issue.
Yes.
So
yes.
what type of playbooks you have developed?
Okay, sure. So, there's so many. Like in BMO, every standard.
That's a very frequent one, which you are.
Okay. One of the frequent ones is mostly when there's we run out of resources. So when the CPU or memory is at its max, and we know that the service is basically hung. Usually happens once every 2-3 weeks, where we know a certain application service can just go down. So that is a playbook that is deployed where it knows what application and host to look at. It will get that ingestion data from ServiceNow as per the current state, in the future directly from Dynatrace, and then it will try and remediate that problem. So that's one of the kinds of playbook that is one of the most often ones. There's also a thread issue where we have seen that sometimes there's a hung thread error in the log file itself, and it's just jamming up a lot of traffic coming in, because not all calls are async. Some of the legacy are sync calls, right? So the thread get hung. So those are one of the scenarios as well where we have the playbooks deployed for fixing the problem. Yeah, many more, but I can definitely chat. Yeah.
One question back
there. Yeah.
Yep. Great presentation. I love seeing real life scenarios and demos.
Yeah.
So my question is regarding the connection between Dynatrace and Ansible. One, is it native, like within Dynatrace, where you can just select, I want to connect to Ansible, and then it connects, or there's some type of API that you need to call? And if so, how do you store your secrets? Because as a bank, security and secret to the environment is critical.
That's a great question. So if we were on Dynatrace managed, then yes, it would have been a simple API call that goes and makes the connection to Ansible, if whatever we have on-prem. But we don't have that. We have Dynatrace SaaS. When you have that, Dynatrace actually launched a new feature called Edge Connect, which is basically their different version of ActiveGates. And what you do is you actually have to set up an Edge Connect container, which is your gateway to these connections, because you're having a SaaS application talking to a managed application, going back and forth between the data centers. So you have data ingress, egress, both. So for that reason, there's this called Edge Connect, which is a simple container setup, and it uses AWS Private Link to connect. That's what we use, so that makes it more secure for the connection. Yeah.
One question.
Hi.
Hi.
So I have a question. So
Yes.
at what point you do the root cause analysis? Let's say there's a problem, an issue arise, you automate the remediation of the issue.
Yeah.
And so if it keeps on automatic, if there is an issue, it's keep on occurring. Let's say like a server which hits the memory disk space issues, like automated remediation increases risks. And it may be due to some other issues on the application or whatever it may be. At what point you do the root cause analysis? How do you figure out that it's repetitive? Do you have any threshold, like this can run only this many times, and after that it has
Yes, that's a very great question. Thank you for asking that. So there's two things that come off of that for RCA purposes. One is, of course, I used to be a robotics developer years ago, and one of the things I learned is never set up an infinite loop. That makes it really bad. So don't have an infinite loop. Obviously, have a counter. So have a 2 or 3 times setup, and if it fails to do that 2 or 3 times, depending on the critical applications, might only do it 1 time. Exit. Send an incident and keep that incident open. So that's one way of doing this. But of course, at the end of the day, these are all banded fixes. Some of these things are banded fixes, and some of these things, they're not banded. They are just permanent. The way the application is designed, a vendor product potentially, you can't fix it. It's a black box. So depending on the type of problem, you should always have proactively open problem management tickets. So we call this the P3L. It's proactive problem parking lot. And when we see issues like this, we create P3L items and we add that to the backlog so we can have our problem managers look at it on a time-to-time basis and make sure that RCA is happening and we're not just doing bandit fixes.
Do you have any live examples?
A live example for P3L?
Live examples having faced this issue?
Yeah, so one of the issues that we faced is there's a vendor application that we used to use, which used to have where we could not deploy Dynatrace's deep monitoring in it, just infrastructure monitoring, because the application was not solid enough and it used to crash on itself. So for that, we opened a problem ticket and worked with the vendor to get a new version developed and deployed and tested. While that was happening, we still had a infrastructure monitoring enabled and an auto remediation scenario where if there's certain factors we start seeing them, we proactively go and restart the application service. So it's like a bandit fix, but at the same time, somebody's looking at the root cause and trying to fix that as well.
Thank you.
No worries. Hi.
Hi, great presentation.
Thank you.
Quick question on drift detection. How do you make sure that the drift is actually a drift and not a planned change that is happening?
Oh, like an actual defined change rather than having undesired state. So when you redeploy the environment with your new repository, it actually, every time a deployment happens through the proper channels, it will take a new snapshot and the drift detector knows what it's looking at. So it deploys a new baseline. So every time you switch that off and you redeploy the environment, you actually are telling drift detector that, hey, I have made these changes. This is my new baseline, and this is what you're going to look at. That's how it kind of goes off of it.
So Dynatrace would know that a change has gone to these servers and it'll automatically get a new snapshot?
No, not Dynatrace. Drift detector service itself. So the drift detector.sh service is a systemd service that actually runs on the virtual machines, and that is what is getting deployed as part of the CSE framework. And it takes a snapshot and it knows what it's looking for. The part in Dynatrace is we ingest the log file of that drift detector, and then we make the decisions after that, the telemetry data, making sure we're closer to the source of the data, the MTTRs and whatnot. So that's the part that comes after.
Thank you.
No worries.
Can you take one other question?
Sure.
Yeah, short question. That was a really nice presentation. So do you have any statistics with regards to how many, for example, incidents have been solved automatically by running a playbook, and how many, like percentage-wise, and how many human intervention?
Well, so for the drift one itself, the future state POC that I was showing, it is still brand new, so we're still building that out. It's not in production today. But the ones for the sense and response, I believe you are from Bank of Montreal, right?
Yes.
Well, let's meet after. Let's book a meeting. Because I can show you the ServiceNow report and it will tell you exactly how many incidents we have solved using the sense and response framework. So just book me for a coffee chat. Okay.
Thank you.
Anybody else? No? Perfect. Yeah?
Hi.
Who am I looking at? Right there. Okay. Yes.
So in Dynatrace, it detects the problems, right? Consider there is a heavy load on the application and the CPU spikes. And then once the load comes down, it automatically resolves the problem.
Yes.
But will Dynatrace analyze that if this is happening continuously for a few days, around some time, like it may not be exactly at the same point of time, but if the problem is repetitive, will Dynatrace analyze and suggest something that, okay, this problem has been identified repetitively, so you have to do this to resolve this?
So does Dynatrace tell you that directly? No, but Dynatrace does show you a pattern of the problem if you look at it in the problem events table. But also at the same time, it is more of the, for example, if there's a batch run happening at 2 o'clock in the morning, we'll always know there's a spike going to happen at 2 o'clock in the morning because it's a batch run happening and there's a lot of data getting through. So it's expected to happen. So the Davis AI will try and manage its own baseline at the time. But what we do proactively is that when we look at these kind of data points, we actually go and change the time slot on that. So we tell that, hey, if the CPU spikes over 90%, but it remains over 90% for 10 minutes or more, only then create a problem event. Don't do it if it is less than 10 minutes, because sometimes the batch runs are usually a few minutes only. So just managing that is a bit of a different scenario.
My question is, if there is a spike which is happening, for a number of days.
Yeah.
So where can you see, that itself is a problem, right? Like,
yeah, so for that
you,
one,
you identified that at some point in the day, the CPU is spiking. And
Yes.
that would be a business requirement. So
Yes.
it's an indication that you have to up your CPU.
Or
How
auto-scaling.
do we
yes.
handle such kind of situations? As an auto detection and
Yeah.
self-healing.
Well, that's definitely a good question. So depending on the type of infrastructure you have this hosted on, you could have auto-scaling enabled and using the event-driven automation from Ansible itself, or using Dynatrace, you can send off these events to auto-scale if required. The easiest way to identify this is, no, Dynatrace does not tell me that directly, but I can build a dashboard for my critical applications to look at these things and see what an anomaly pattern looks like. So it is more of the data that you're interested in to put that on the dashboard and then go from there. I think I'm running out of time, so we should connect after. I'm around here for all day. So let's talk more in detail. I like your questioning.
So much great information in that session. Now we're going to listen in on Piyush Patel from Red Hat, who's going to show us how Red Hat can help you along the path to accelerate your use of automation and how to promote and build a community of practice around Ansible automation.
So by show of hands, how many of you have heard of the term Center of Excellence or have a Center of Excellence? A good bit. How many of you think a Center of Excellence and a community of practice is one and the same? Some of you? Okay. To me, it's a matter of sort of not just an opinion, but also what perception is for a COE or Center of Excellence, right? So what we're talking today is the what, why, when, and how of a communities of practice. Let's start with what is a community of practice and what is particularly an automation community of practice. So I'll try to read this definition of a community. This is based from the dictionary. A group of people who share a concern or passion for something they do and learn how to do it better as they interact regularly. This is from the dictionary, so let that sink in. What it translates to, it means that organization of individuals coming together for a focused cause that's going to affect them or the community at large. They have a problem to solve. This problem could be technical, process, or anything. So just a basic definition of a community. What are some of the examples of communities we see out there? Ansible is one of the biggest and the largest community that exists today. The whole premise of the product or the software, Ansible, came to being with the open source mentality of having a community behind Ansible. And that's where we've seen it grow and be stronger and improve and get better. Some other communities, we at Red Hat have several communities of practice. These could be tied to our products, our tools, technologies. Like we've got some for automation, we've got some for RHEL, OpenShift. We've got some for even like project management and stuff. So another example is the HIPAA.org or HIFA.org, Health Information for All. This is a community where people can go post questions for exchanging health and related information and stuff like that. So as you see, these are three different examples, but the basic kind of fundamental point between those is very similar. They are all there to share ideas, collaborate, and then kind of improve and get better. So taking that forward to what is an automation community of practice? Teams vested in automation efforts across organization, dedicated to further automation adoption while maturing within the organization, right? That's what we take that definition of community to an automation community of practice. This community can be made up of several teams. It will be made up of several teams. These teams could be, for example, you could have a team that's focused on automation, on operations, on applications. On the operations side, you could have them multiple features and facets. You could have them on OS, network, storage, databases, cloud, you name it, right? So this is what would be a buildup of an automation community of practice. Next, we go to why should you be interested in creating an automation COP? So when I asked the question about the COE stuff, to me personally, whenever I hear the term Center of Excellence, that resonates as there's one team of experts, right? That's there to solve problems for everyone. And if you see an intrinsic problem of scale, that's what communities of practice can help you kind of go look beyond that. So scalability is one of the kind of the major advantages that a COP can help you with. The other thing is standards, right? If you have just one team working on something, the standards are what they decide and what they can kind of come up with, and they regulate those standards. If you have a community around something, and everyone is allowed and included to provide feedback, provide input, provide kind of better practices. So I'm one that is a fan of better practices over best practices. Because when somebody says a best practice, that means there is no room for improvement. That's why I always like the term better practices, because there's always probably somebody is going to find and suggest a better way of doing things. So it's always evolving, always growing, maturing, right? The last and one of the critical ones that I'd like to kind of talk about is adoption. So if you have a community that you've kind of built out around, say, automation in this case, you'll have more people interested, included, collaborating, sharing ideas, solving problems, and kind of adopting. So that's, again, for me personally, Red Hat, I'd like to have more of my customers adopt automation or Ansible in this case. So what should be the kind of the definition or objectives and kind of outcomes from a community of practice or automation community of practice? I'll give you another thing before I go further. At Red Hat, we love acronyms. If you haven't noticed, that's why on all my slides you'll see COP, COE, or things like that. But I like to try and make sure that I'm kind of, if you catch me saying an acronym that you don't know, please raise your hand. So objectives of a COP should be to define processes, standards, have governance, and as like I said, I'll edit this one and change the best to a better or good practices, right? And then, so what does this enable? When you have an automation community of practice, you get more people sharing ideas, coming up and presenting problems that can be solved by multiple people kind of joining together and trying to solve a common issue, right? So this, and then you enforce standards and governance around it. Without standards and governance and regulations, this can kind of, if you let it happen as the Wild Wild West, it's gonna fail. So, and the other thing that also a community should enable is it should make everyone feel welcome to be part of this community, to ask questions, right? We want to be that all-inclusive, so it's always evolving, always improving and growing. What are some of the benefits of having a COP? You're collaborating, so you're connecting people. You are, again, with more inputs, more thoughts, more ideas, more minds working together, you're enabling dialogue. You letting people point out either better ways to do it or ask questions is like, hey, I'm having this problem. Has anyone solved this? So you're enabling the dialogue. You're always stimulating learning, right? So when, as a community, as multiple teams interact and come together, they are kind of learning, growing, maturing. Again, facilitating and encouraging collaboration across multiple teams, multiple organizations, and so on and so forth. And then sharing, right? So best way for me personally, I've seen this best way for me to learn is when somebody shows me how to do something. I'm a visual learner. I not just by attending a class or something, but I like to kind of get hands-on, share, and then kind of collaborate. So what are some of the other benefits from an individual perspective? If you're part of a community, you get a chance to get recognized for being somebody that has contributed to the community, to be an expert or be good at something, right? You have a forum and a platform to get recognized. You grow thought leadership and thought leaders. You are upskilling folks. So with an automation COP, folks don't need to know Ansible to be a thought leader or an expert, but they can grow and they can learn and they can kind of adopt Ansible or automation. And like I said, I want to call this an automation COP, not an Ansible COP, right? So there may be multiple different tools and frameworks that you use for automation, Ansible being one of those. And then you have your kind of the regular people manager recognition, performance evaluation, and so on and so forth. So when you have ways of showing that you're contributing and participating in the community, that adds to those kind of individual benefits as well. So next question, when should you create an automation COP? Is there a good time? Should I create one before I start and embark on the journey? Should I mature a little bit before I start an automation COP? Or I'm already far advanced, can I start an automation COP? So there is no particular kind of the best place to start off with. But what I'd like to say is, if you don't start, there are some disadvantages of if you don't get there, right? If you have a single team siloed, then you go down a path and then you may have to, it may take you longer to undo if you realize that, hey, this is not the right choice we made, right? So we have as part of Red Hat Consulting and Services, we have what we call an automation adoption journey approach, where we want folks to start on like the theme was said today. It was begin small and build big success, right? So we have this journey approach, and you can start the automation COP right at the beginning. You seed it, you have the discussions. You don't need automation in place to have an automation COP. You can kind of grow together. The other problems that if you don't start one, you'll have siloed pockets of automation, duplication of effort, a lot of people doing the same thing, different ways, no collaboration, no sharing of ideas, nothing going on. And then you lose, so the loss is time, right? If you, because of the duplication of effort, you're losing time, you're not gaining the benefits of collaboration and sharing. So this is an eye chart. I cannot agree. This is a detailed list of outcomes that we pick and choose with some of our customers when we deliver an adoption journey approach, right? So the key is the navigate phase, which is our kind of the kickstart of the journey. We start discussions around communities of practice. In the foundational, when we are setting up the platform and getting the first few use cases, we kind of establish that core team that's going to manage and monitor and moderate the community, right? So that's in the foundation, and then we mature, adding more automation to the catalog, building more successes, and kind of sharing and collaborating. This is where you start kind of looking at, hey, does this playbook need to be converted into a role? Is there more use for it? Is this going to be something that I can kind of share? And am I enforcing standards on my code development and code content, right? So, and then as you kind of keep this going in later phases, you're sustaining and you're maturing, and this community keeps growing and growing. How do you get started? You could definitely do it yourself, right? Again, I personally would like for you to kind of engage services, but don't have to. So when you start thinking about, hey, I want to start an automation COP, some of the key things to kind of keep in mind. Timeliness and management during the incubation period. You've got to give it time. You can't expect it to kind of, you put the seeds in, why is the plant not growing, right? No, you got to nurture it, you got to water it, and then let it grow. You want to make sure you define your success criteria, right? So one of our key pillars in consulting and services is the fail fast, right? We don't need to keep kind of going down a path. So we define our success criteria, and if we're not reaching the success criteria, we need to kind of think of options. Right? So define your success criteria. Content's always going to be key. So you kind of have a mechanism and documented processes of how you want to get your content migrated, branching, sharing, and so on and so forth. And look beyond the platform, right? So it's not all about just the platform. So because you want to encourage ideas from all different kinds of stuff. So don't box yourself into the platform discussion. Think beyond it. As I said, Red Hat Consulting Services has that tailorable journey that can help you get started with a COP and then kind of help you grow, be sort of your training wheels, if you say, for getting your community, getting your automation going and so on and so forth. So we've got prescriptive models and approach that we've developed as part of the kind of our offerings and solutions. We've got the experience because we've done this time and again within Red Hat, with our customers, and so on and so forth. And as I said, we can always assist you in being successful on embarking on the automation journey. So how do you get people to participate, right? The key things are you want to make sure that you're following at least these 4 kind of key objectives. You enable promotion of good ideas, you recognize good ideas, you kind of reward good ideas, you provide them visibility, right? We've done, with some of our customers, we've done like lunch and learns. We give them the opportunity to say, hey, this was a problem that was solved by the community, this is what the approach was, this is so on and so forth. So you give them a platform to share and be visible. You involve. As my buddy Walter would tell us, you cast a wide net. Don't limit yourself to kind of just one team, like, hey, IT operations is the only team that needs automation. No, you'll be surprised. You may find, I've seen finance and those teams have automation needs as well. Is as we said, automation is not one of those nice to have. It's now become key part of, doesn't matter what field, what technology you're using. And then kind of enablement, right? Where you have people that are maturing, and as they mature, they become mentors and they bring on other people along with them to grow, to kind of take on opportunities, have mentors, have mentees, and we've seen this as a kind of a program that is in place to recognize people that are being mentors, as well as the mentees getting a chance to thank the mentors, and them themselves, as they grow, they become mentors themselves. So just, again, quick, not really a sales pitch, but Red Hat Services, we've got 3 main components. We've got our traditional consulting, we've got the training, and then we've got TAMS, right? So we cover all 3 branches of needs with consulting, training, and support, right? So again, happy to talk to folks to kind of learn more about Red Hat Services, how we can help, or anything that you want to kind of talk about as far as COP or communities of practice, how to get started. So, questions? Okay. See, Walter, I told you, between lunch, I thought I was going to build the appetite.
No, I'm not. You're not going to get off.
Come on.
Question or two. I'm not going to let you walk away. So, in my opinion, what suggestions would you give an organization as to maybe how they can start? What would some of the first steps you would recommend to starting a COP?
First is have discussion about COPs, right? Once you have those discussions, now you start talking about what is the kind of think beyond technology. Think you want to enable folks to either, in this case, what are the problems you're trying to solve? Come up with problems to solve, give them a platform and give them a forum to bring those problems to solve, facilitate that, as well as then now you go start building a core team that will be your pilot, or like in our journey, we have a pilot team that grows into a core team. And this core team then starts that seed of the community, right? And then as you have more use cases, you kind of grow and mature. Now this core team becomes the kind of the moderators or managers of communities. Good question. Thanks, Walter.
Here's one here, Piyush.
There you go. Okay. Thank you. I want to ask a quick question. What is the level of expertise needed to start a COP? Do you need to be an expert in a specific, tool to start a COP, or can you, with your basic knowledge, start, a COP?
So we like to kind of make sure that a COP is tool agnostic, right? So you don't really need a tool to start a community. What you can do is you can build a community around a tool and technology, but don't limit it. You can have multiple communities around technologies, right? So hopefully I answered that question. Okay.
Good.
Looks like we're good.
Thank you.
Thanks.
No doubt. I appreciate you. Piyush. Okay. And just to follow up on the question the gentleman had there, while it's not necessarily a technology skill, it's more of the skill that you would equate to someone who is maybe who runs a Scrum meeting, or someone who understands agile practices. That's the type of skill set that you would need to be someone who could possibly be your community practice leader and get things started. And then, of course, you need to find your automation evangelist, someone who just loves automation, lives and breathes it, is super excited about it, has a smile on his face like that gentleman there in the audience. That's the other person you need to get started. And I'm sorry not to jump in on your...
And that just reminded me, the other thing to make a community successful is to have leadership be part of it, yes, and encourage and make this a priority, right? Absolutely. So to your question, what you asked, like, what do you need to get a community started? Those are some of the key things. And sponsorship and making a priority from leadership is an absolute must.
Cool. Round of applause for Piyush again.
This next session has a fun title that I think we can all relate to: No More Tickets. Telling us how to use observability and event-driven automation to reduce the need for service tickets is Patrick Toll, Senior Specialist Solution Architect at Red Hat.
We're going to bring up on stage a gentleman by the name of Patrick Toll. He is the Senior Specialist Solution Architect here at Red Hat, and his advice to you is, life is not a race. Please, Patrick.
Thanks, Walter. Thank you. I'm good. I brought my own clicker.
See, look at that. He comes with his own clicker. Enjoy.
All right, good afternoon. I have about 16 slides, 2 demos, and 30 minutes. So welcome to my lightning talk. Today's topic is titled No More Tickets. Honestly, that was to get you in the room because I can't eliminate all the tickets. There's too many of them. However, I am going to help you reduce them. So I'm going to talk about event-driven automation, which you've heard about today. I'm going to do a little bit of a demo on EDA, 2 of them actually, so you can see kind of how it works. And I'm going to leave you with some resources, and hopefully we have some time for Q&A, okay? So we've talked a lot today. A lot of folks have talked about advanced, kind of this curve of automation adoption. And with Ansible, what we're trying to do is create positive feedback loops. We're trying to help you change behavior, modernize technology, standardize your infrastructure, and do it all in kind of a self-fulfilling positive loop, right? And so when we see organizations go through this, we talk about, people get started with Ansible tactically. Hey, I grabbed Ansible, I wrote a little playbook, helped me save some time. We move through, we try and get to IT process automation where we start gluing bits of things together. We've got my networking, my Windows, my Linux teams, they're all automating. We're using a common language called Ansible. We're learning how to make an automation-first mindset, right? These are really key things to changing culture and changing how we do IT. Right? We're trying to modernize IT. We're trying to take the same processes and the same things that some of the cloud native stuff is doing and apply it to the rest of our infrastructure. And then we talk about AI ops, and we talk about, this all singing, all dancing, self-healing, all of this stuff. I'm a big fan of AI. AI has changed things in a way that I don't think anybody was really ready for. When things like ChatGPT started becoming very big, it was a massive transition. But as was said earlier, there's a problem with AI ops meeting its full potential right now. And part of that problem is that we don't have the documentation, we don't have the knowledge to feed into the AI systems. We still need people. I need to walk down the hall to Bob and ask Bob how that thing was set up, because Bob's the only one in my organization that knows, because he's the one that built it and he didn't fully document it. Right? So until we have a full documentation on all of these massive amounts of systems we have, we can't really fully get the benefits, I think, of AI ops. So how many people in the room have a single vendor for all of their IT stuff? Right? How about a single vendor for all of their networking? Right? This is the power of Ansible in my mind. There are lots of other tools out there. You are using a vast swath of tools. There's about 300 people in this room. There's probably 8,000 tools that you all have to deal with, right? Ansible's not designed to replace them all. Ansible's designed to augment them, sometimes replace, but mostly connect, right? By giving people a tool, I call Ansible the Swiss Army chainsaw, right? It can do a little bit of everything and it's super powerful. By giving you a tool that can apply to different domains, I can start to collaborate and document in code my IT process. So for day 2, now I've got all of this stuff out there, right? How do I operate it? People pick up Ansible to start configuration management, and then they do a little bit of provisioning. How do I get to a point where now my day 2 operations can start to take advantage of the fact that I've already started codifying my process? Now let's codify what I do in day 2. So traditionally what we do is we have manual remediations of operations incidents, right? The process looks something like this. I have an event, something happens, a phone is picked up, a ticket is opened, somebody decides that there's a problem, And it might actually be a tool now, right? We saw Rohan did a great talk this morning with the Dynatrace stuff, right? I'm going to leverage on that. So it could be a tool, but there's still, after that process of identifying an issue, we have an evaluation. We open a ticket, a human goes and looks at the thing, and then the human has to decide, what do I do? And then the manual remediation of responding, how do I fix that thing, right? Again, also often a human, right? Because we haven't codified the process, we can't have a reliable execution. And Rohan talked about drift. Drift is one of the things that prevents you from automating. I made a change in production to fix a thing last week, and it didn't get reincorporated back into the rest of the system and process, right? How do I control drift is a key thing to being able to automate remediation. So what we're trying to do with event-driven Ansible, Ansible has been fantastic for automating the how to get things done, right? The responding part, the action. What we're doing with event-driven Ansible is we're moving Ansible into the decision-making process, right? So we have observability tools. We've got, I'm going to show you a little bit with Grafana later. It could be Dynatrace. It could be any number of different tools from your cloud providers, from other vendors. It could be networking based. It could be, there's so many tools out there that do observation and decision making. Having that data fed into something where somebody who is not an expert in 8 different platforms, somebody who doesn't know how to write JavaScript, right, to codify something, how do I give them the power to do something on the evaluate part of the loop? So here's how EDA works in a nutshell. We have sources. Now your source is your source of information, right? This is your telemetry coming in. I'll talk about all the different sources we can pull data in from later, but the idea here is that I have stuff out there already. Let's take that information. Maybe it's coming from Dynatrace. Maybe it's coming from Azure Service Bus. Maybe it's coming from Bob's shell script. Who knows, right? We're going to take that source. We're going to feed it into a rules engine. This is where EDA comes in. We're going to use EDA to decide how to act. And then the action part, that's your Ansible playbook. Okay? So if you've written, just to show of hands, how many people in the room have written an Ansible playbook? I would have expected more. It's an Ansible event, but you know. So playbooks are the language of Ansible automation, right? And it's a language that goes across your IT organization. I spent 16 years at a networking vendor, okay, so I have a networking background. Anybody from the networking background that still copies and pastes stuff into iOS CLI? I know you're out there, okay? So an Ansible playbook can be used by anybody. This is the wonderful thing about it. It's YAML. Some people don't like YAML. I get it. White space being significant is a little confusing. However, by the way, if you don't like that, use Ansible lint and syntax checking in VS Code. There's an Ansible plugin, little plug for the plugin. But the idea with Ansible playbooks are not only are they easy to write, they're easy to read. And that is more important in my mind than being easy to write. Because if I can read a playbook and know what it does, it's way easier to maintain, it's way easier to change, it's way easier to innovate on, right? An Ansible rulebook, very similar. Written in YAML, looks like a playbook, but instead of creating actions, it does evaluations and decision making. So this is an Ansible rulebook, looks very similar. It's the language of Ansible EDA. We use the rulebook to process events, take conditional management of actions, and then decide how to act. Okay? So, on that, let's switch over to the demo. Nope, not that slide. All right. Here I have a Grafana dashboard, and for those of you who prefer dark mode, I'm sorry, this just works better. Whoever uses Grafana in light mode. So here I have a server that I'm monitoring. You can see that the root file system has about 59% utilization, and the CPU's got about 2.7% load. I am going to artificially increase the use on the the disk, right? I'm going to create a bunch of data on the log directory, and this is just a demo, so don't say, hey, that's not a real world situation. I know it's not. I can't show you the whole complexity here, right? But I'm going to run a playbook, right? So my log disk fills up. I need to clean up some files. This is really straightforward. This cleans up log files called testlog.star that are bigger than 1 gig in size. I have the option to copy them to an archive server. I can do anything in the Ansible playbook. I can codify my process for how I do this. You have a process today to clean up log files on servers, I'm sure. Codify that, write it down in an Ansible playbook. Then I'm going to delete the files, and I'm going to just dump out some data on what I did, right? And here I have, I'm using Prometheus Alert Manager, okay? And I will show you that one in a second. I'm going to start with this Ansible rule, which is listening to Alert Manager on port 9101. I'm going to create a rule called resolve disk usage. And here you can see the condition is when the org is OIS and the alert status is firing and the alert name is root file system over 80% full, I'm going to take an action. In this case, the action is run job template. Run job template is calling Ansible controller to execute my playbook. Pretty straightforward. So what are we going to do? We're going to go over here, and I'm just going to fill this disk up. Oh, I should probably be connected. That would be helpful. All right, let's try that again. So, Linux folks, I'm just dumping a bunch of zeros because they're free onto the disk, and I'm making a 10 gig file. What you're going to see over here on my observability with Grafana is my root file system use is going up. Now, when my alert is triggered, and I have an alert here which says root file system is over 80% full, it's currently in the status of normal, but very shortly it's turning to pending. Okay, my disk is full, I've detected that, my rule has matched, I haven't fired the alert yet. But in a couple of seconds, my alert is going to switch from pending to firing, and what will happen is I will trigger my EDA rulebook as soon as my page reloads. It wouldn't be a live demo if it went smoothly. So over here, you can see I have what's called a rulebook activation. And down here, I have an alert manager listener. This is basically a setup for my rulebook to be running. So when I run my rulebook, it's running as a listener. It's running all the time. And as long as it's active, it's receiving events from somewhere. In this case, I'm listening to that rulebook I showed you. And here I've got some rule, the rule audit list is what are the actions, what events came in that I decided to action. So when this fires off, when this alert switches to firing, which it should be now, okay, we're now firing, what we're going to see is, we're going to see resolve, there it is, it moved while I wasn't looking. We see resolve disk usage popped up to the top of the list. So I can click on this, and here you can see that I got an event from my Alert Manager listener. And here I've got a payload. So Alert Manager is sending me a bunch of information about what the host was, what the device was that filled up, right? I'm getting all of that information in my alert, and now I can turn around and use that in my playbook. So I then trigger an action, which is to run a job template in my Ansible controller. When I click on this and I go over to the controller, I can see the job that ran. I can see that it executed a playbook, right? The template was clean log directory. And I can go and see the output. I'm going to close that down. And here you can see that I found the files, I deleted the files, and then I dumped some information about what the files were. And here you can see that before I had a file called testlog, and now it's absent, right? So pretty straightforward, simple use case to give you an idea, and you can see my root file system usage gone back to 59%, okay? Again, the idea here is not the specific use case, but the idea that I can now trigger Ansible playbooks, actions, based on events that are happening, and I can connect them to my existing tools. Second demo. I'm going to show you a slightly different use of EDA. That is a resolution, right? So this EDA, the first one is I saw a thing, I took an action. When I get confident enough that my process has been codified to be reliable and my standardization is such that I can reliably run a playbook, I can automatically remediate things. But maybe I want to start smaller. Maybe I want to start with just, I want to start doing investigation of incidents. So I have another incident that I'm going to create. And this incident is, I'm going to create an artificial CPU spike. I'm going to add some stress to my server. So literally, I'm going to add stress. This is a little Linux tool that basically just spikes the CPU. So you'll see here, my CPU busy is going to start ramping up, okay, as my metrics go up. What's going to happen is I'm actually going to go to this other rule, so the disk usage one isn't going to match, but the investigate high CPU is going to match. So what I'm doing here is, again, I'm matching the event, or the org, and the status is firing, and the alert name is process CPU hog, and I'm going to print event, so this is for some debugging so I can see what's in it, and then I'm going to run a job template, a different job template. And that job template is going to do something interesting. I'm going to basically just grab some data. You probably have a process where if something goes bump in the night, you log in and you run a bunch of commands. Well, that's what I'm doing here. I'm running a bunch of commands, basically just getting some process information. The first one I'm sorting by CPU load. The second one I'm sorting by memory use. And then I'm going to open a ServiceNow ticket, and I'm going to create a problem, and then I'm going to attach that information to the ticket. So if I go over here and look at my ServiceNow dashboard, we'll see if it's run yet. It hasn't. Okay. By the way, anybody who lives in ServiceNow has probably never seen an incidents board that's empty. This is what it looks like. Okay. So here we go. I'm going to look at my alert rules again, and you can see my process CPU hog alert is now firing. And then over here, I should be able to see, here's my investigate high CPU, match my action. And I'm going to go in and I'm going to look at the events, and I'm going to look at my listener, and here's all the information for that. What's key is in here, I've got, the data, but I've also got the host that's affected. So I'm passing that to my playbook as a parameter to say, just run this playbook on that host, right? So I'm limiting it to that host. So let's go and look at our incidents again and see if we have an incident. Oops. Here we go. It opened my incident. You can see here I have a CPU hog event detected on BAB1. And if I click on that, you can see, there we go. We can see the information. So we can see that it was created, it was new, and now it's in progress. And also, more importantly, I can go in and I can look at my problems. And anybody who lives in ServiceNow is probably looking at me going, why are you doing it that way? So here you can see that I have a problem that was created. This problem here, actually I'll go into it this way, pardon me. Somebody after, if you want to correct me on how to use ServiceNow correctly, please feel free. So here I have a new problem. It's been opened, the status is new, but the interesting thing I wanted to show you here is I also used Ansible to attach a document to this. So I've clicked on this, I'm going to open it, and that's an eye chart. So here you can see I actually attached to the ticket the output from my commands. So now the person who picks up this ticket and looks at the problem can actually have a head start. Oh, I see that the problem here is that I've got 4 processes called stress that are consuming 98+% of the CPU, right? And so I've already attached some information. How did I get this? I kind of glossed over that, so I should go back to it. I created a template, a Jinja 2 template, and I don't know how readable that is, so I'll just make that a little bigger. I created a Jinja 2 template. I basically substituted in the data I got from the EDA event, and I created a little report. Imagine you could do anything with this. This is just me hacking around for 15 minutes, but you could create a pretty interesting report. You could create a CSV file, an HTML file, right? And then attach that information to the ticket. So now that I've picked up the ticket, I understand what the problem is. I'm going to go into that server and I'm going to kill all stress. Cool. If only it were that easy to just kill all stress. No? And then I can go into my service now and I can put in information and close the ticket. So that is, and then if I go back to my dashboard here, in a minute, of course, my CPU will drop back down to 0. So that, in a nutshell, is some of how the high-level EDA works. This is just the tip of the iceberg, right? We can do a lot more. And one of the things I want to highlight about this is we have integrations for sources that are already out there, already built by Red Hat and by our partners and by other people in the community. These are available today. It's also really easy to write your own source, right? So it's just Python, like Ansible modules. They're pretty easy to write. But also the webhook one, for example, is super useful, right? Webhook can listen to any webhook. And in fact, where EDA kind of came from was people said, I want to trigger Ansible playbooks. How do I do that? And they started writing custom webhook handlers, like little Node.js programs that just sat on servers listening for webhooks and then firing off a webhook to the Ansible RESTful API. And people say, hey, that's really useful. We should make this better. And so that's kind of where one of the places where EDA came from, right? So webhooks is still an easy way to connect pretty much, a large swath of stuff that's already out there that supports webhooks. But the nice thing, and you saw I used the Prometheus Alert Manager hook, it also automatically passed in data, right? Like what host, I didn't have to extract the host from a JSON object, right? It was all just there for me. So if there's a native one, that's really quite helpful. So the idea here, and I want to leave you with, is this is really powerful, and it can be used across the IT footprint. It doesn't matter if you already have a tool that has some automation in it. I can apply this to networking. I can apply it to cloud. One of the questions people often ask me, and I'm going to take questions in a minute, but I'm going to head this one off because I always get asked this. Why would I use EDA other than XYZ? And the answer is, I like to turn it around. I said, well, you would use EDA when you want a common tool across your environment that's vendor agnostic, that can connect your observability with actions in your environment. Okay? There are lots of tools that do better than Ansible at lots of different things, but they tend to be very focused on their use cases. Ansible and Ansible EDA are custom building to your use cases because nobody in this room has the same infrastructure as somebody else. We always do things that are custom to our organizations, right? And so for an organization to get the benefits of automation across the organization, I need tools that span disciplines. And that's where I think the power of Ansible and EDA come in. I'm going to leave you with some resources. I don't know if it's been mentioned, but these slides should all be available to you after the event. All of these links take you to some great places. I highly recommend Self-Paced Labs. They're very good. You can try this out, kick the tires yourself in a real environment. And the blogs are also fantastic. So that's the end of my talk. I made it in less than 23 minutes, which is awesome, and it means I have time for questions. So does anybody have any questions? I have my lovely assistant, Derek White, over here, or Vanna White. No, sorry, I'm just kidding. I'm happy to take any questions you have.
Yep. It was awesome presentation. So my question would be is, we have been using action, but I think it's triggers on your tower. So but we are calling as an action as a tower action where you can run as a runbook. So you're invoking runbook directly from the tower. So how is this event-driven would help when you're doing the similar thing through tower?
So I think the question was, if you're not using Tower, how do you use Ansible event-driven automation? Exactly. Okay. So the first thing is I'm not allowed to say tower anymore. If I do that, I have to put $1 in the swear jar. But the name for that is Ansible Controller in the enterprise software version. If you're not using the enterprise software, look, Red Hat is an open source first company, right? So we're an enterprise software company with an open source development model, which means that all of the bits are out there, and that's no different with EDA. You can get the Ansible rulebook command line tool, and you can run that on the command line, and I do that sometimes in development to get rapid feedback. And then you can, instead of the run job template, you can run a playbook directly off the same machine, right? So you can get the bits and you can do it by hand if that's your sort of thing, right? It's kind of like, you know, if you're a mechanic and you like to build cars, you know, by all means, build cars. Me, I like to get in my car and drive, but, you know, I did start out with Ansible in using community software, and I know that's where most people do get started, so all the bits are there.
Okay. Yeah. So we've been doing similar thing, but instead of using event-driven, I think, which is a new thing started where you can put in conditions or logic where it is running, looking for the events which are matching for it. Instead, what we are doing is in the actions, we are calling the runbook. So we're just skipping off the event layer. Would it still work, or would you say the event-driven is a future we're looking at?
I think the power of the event-driven automation is that it gives us the flexibility to use the same language that we're writing our automation in, but to use a separate decision-making process that's specifically designed for that, right? I don't know how you're collecting your events, like what your listener is, right? But often that has been a custom-built thing, and generally we're trying to get away from custom-built things to, you know, this is a kind of a standard, right? We don't want to create one-offs and create more technical debt. So EDA is a way to kind of encompass that event conditional, the rule evaluation into a standardized format.
Got it. Should be good. Thank you.
Any other questions? Oh, we got one down here in front, and one way over there on the end. You're going to get exercise today, Derek?
I have two questions.
Yes.
The first is, in what version of AAP is event-driven process available?
So EDA is available in Ansible 2.4 as, I believe it's, and Phil, if you're in the room, correct me, is it tech preview in 2.4 or is it full? It's GA. So it's available in 2.4, it's GA. We're about to announce I'm not allowed to say things, but when we do Summit, we usually announce new product features and stuff, so any enhancements will be announced at Summit.
Okay, the second question is, I see you have a lot of vendor product as part of your integration list, but I'm not seeing PagerDuty. Is there a reason why? Because PagerDuty is widely used within the industry when it comes to alerting and remediation.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any plans to integrate that on your roadmaps or anywhere?
Yeah.
It's not a native integration, it uses the webhook. So you use the webhook methodology and they'll talk bidirectionally to each other. If you want, we can discuss afterwards, I can show you how it's done.
Yeah. One of the things is we can't fit everything on the slide. So, and Ansible talks to so much, we kind of have to cherry pick. But yeah, as I mentioned, the webhook integration allows you to integrate with all kinds of things, even if they're not listed on the slide. Okay, over here on the right.
Yeah, hi. Is it fair to say that organizations should replace their existing bash scripts, ideally with Ansible playbooks? And if so, what are the limitations?
Absolutely, no more bash scripts. I mean, I don't know what you expected me to say as the Ansible guy, but...
No, but I mean, about the limitations, it would be interesting to see in practical terms. I mean, you have worked with a lot of clients.
Right.
What are like kind of the things what you need to look out for, some gotchas or, things like that?
Sure, great question. So look, I mean, flippancy aside, right? Like Bash, and Bash is still better than Corn Shell scripts. I get a lot, people still have Corn Shell scripts written by some guy in the 80s who doesn't work there anymore. I have a couple of those clients. So look, yes, you can rewrite your Bash scripts into Ansible playbooks. And I highly encourage Ansible playbooks over bash scripts, certainly for new stuff. What normally happens in my experience is folks start with a bash script that was written, and then they encapsulate it into an Ansible playbook, and then they kind of start breaking it down into a playbook. There's pros and cons to everything, right? The bash script, the pro for that is that it's already been written. It already does the thing. It's well understood. It ain't broken, don't fix it, is often the thing. One of the things about Ansible is it unlocks innovation, right? And the bash script is a perfect example. If I write a bash script today, and I leave the organization 6 months from now, who maintains that bash script? And if I want to change something that bash script does, who does that? Who figures out what that bash script does? How does it work? So if I write that same process into an Ansible playbook, again, YAML is easier to read than bash. I've written shell scripts before that I don't remember what they do when I go back to them, and I wrote them, right? Ansible playbooks, as I said, are meant to be read as well as written. Right? So there's some advantages there. The other big advantage is Ansible playbooks should be idempotent, which means I can run that playbook 12 times, and if nothing needs to change, nothing gets changed. If I run a bash script, it's generally not idempotent. It's going to do the thing every time, or I'm going to have to write a whole bunch of conditional logic in my bash script to decide if I need to do a thing or not. So from that perspective, an Ansible playbook, in my view, is superior. But again, you know, somebody always throws me a corner case that says, oh, yeah, no, in that case, yeah, keep your bash script, right? Okay, any other questions? I know I'm at time here. One in the middle? Sure. I love playing Stump the Ansible guy. There's a little red light flashing, just so you know. I'm going to get the hook.
All right, thanks. Yeah, it goes back to your demonstration of the listener piece, right? Waiting for those alerts to come in through the manager. How scalable is that? Because that's going to play a big decision on whether or not we could actually implement it in our organization when we look at thousands and thousands of playbooks and hundreds of teams. Is that something that is you spawning a new port for each listener, for each team, or is this like you one for the organization and now you have to do a whole bunch of logic to figure out whose playbooks it executes and all that?
That's a great question. Probably the answer to it is longer than I have time, because Phil's going to run me off stage in a second. Actually, you know, Phil may have some philosophies on that, so you should find us afterwards. I'll give you the short version. The short version is this. It's been designed to be scalable. You can create as many servers as you need. You can have as many listeners as you need. Or you can, you know, if you've got one event source and you've got multiple rules that you want to run against it, right? That could be one listener. The answer is it's really flexible. So it's a conversation that I think we would need to go, like, what are your requirements, and do some discovery, and then make a suggestion. Okay, I think that's it for me. Thank you for your time.
Believe it or not, we have arrived at the last session of the event. Hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have so far. And now we're going to finish strong with Alan O from Red Hat, who's going to dig into the business value of automation. Alan's going to bring it all together to show how the Red Hat Ansible automation platform empowers organizations to streamline operations and drive innovation.
I'm the senior manager for the business value practice. Oh, sorry. Okay. And in the previous sessions, you learned all about the technology and the technical benefits of Ansible. So what I wanted to go over today was the business value aspects of Ansible, right? So a lot of the Ansible technical values, I think a lot of the people that work with Ansible in IT know technically how it improves their lives and how it makes their IT operations more efficient and better. Often upper management needs to be convinced that the investment in Ansible is worth it, right? Because it could be very costly in terms of the subscriptions and the consulting and the internal efforts in order to implement it. So is it really worth the return on investment? And what I wanted to go over is the actual business value drivers of Ansible, as well as how you can actually create a business case for Ansible, so that if you need to get approval for Ansible automation, so if you don't have Ansible right now, or you want to increase your use cases for Ansible, how you can put together a business case, a business value analysis, consisting of like an ROI, TCO, in order to convince your managers that it's worth investing in Ansible or further investment in Ansible. So a little bit about the Red Hat Business Value Practice, which I'm a part of. And we're about 30 people within Red Hat that focus on linking the potential like existing and technology investments to business outcomes. So a lot of times a customer will come to us, say an IT team that really knows that Ansible is improving their enterprise. And they'll say, well, we want to get this project approved, but we need to do a financial justification. So it could be Ansible, it could be OpenShift or RHEL or application runtimes, but whatever is the solution in our portfolio, we can come in, do a discovery, and help the customer create a business case for that product. And we will show both quantifiably and from a narrative standpoint why they should actually invest in the technology, right? Why does it actually matter? So a little bit about like what's kind of what goes like under the covers, what's involved. How many of you actually have done like an ROI analysis or a financial justification for automation or Ansible? So a few of you, right? And like this is kind of how the sausage is made. So it's kind of a spreadsheet process if you do it at a very detailed level. But you basically get together all of the different categories of use cases that you have. Like, so for example, server administration. So that could involve tasks like server provisioning, config management, patching, as well as network management, firewalls, cloud management use cases, DR use cases, and cloud, and so on. So all the different tasks that right now you do in a manual workflow, or maybe you're using other alternative automation platforms that are inferior, you itemize and you list out how many hours it takes you right now to do these tasks, right? And then you try to figure out, if you automate it with Ansible, what does that eliminate in terms of the hours that you require right now? So if you have certain tasks like server patching and you do this 1,000 times a year and each server patching task takes an hour, then multiply 1,000 by an hour, and then what would you do what would it take you if you were to automate all of that so that you no longer are doing this in a manual process? So it's 1,000 hours saved. Plus, when you do a lot of these tasks, it's not just about the work, but a lot of tasks like, say, server patching or config management have an error rate. So customers say when they do patching, they'll have like 5 to 10% that don't patch correctly, right? So you have to spend an additional number of hours doing recovery. You have to do the rework on those unpatched servers. And then all of that goes into the total amount of time that you've eliminated potentially, or you could eliminate with Ansible, right? And then you multiply that by the hourly rate, and voila, there you go. There's your annual FTE savings cost, right? And so often the business case for automation starts with the FTE labor costs because that's the most obvious point of benefit, right? And the previous presentation went into the automation analytics, which actually does that in an automated fashion. But what if you don't have Ansible? What if this is a new footprint of Ansible? Then how do you kind of estimate your future savings, right? So this is kind of the approach that you would take if you were to do that just for the manual hours saved. But there's other aspects of Ansible benefits, right? So there's risk mitigation, right? If you do things in a manual workflow, you're going to have errors. You're going to have things that cause additional unplanned outages. You're going to have things that cause security incidents or compliance incidents. And those are costs that you could potentially avoid by implementing Ansible. And a lot of these costs have very significant dollars associated with it. So I primarily work with NA FSI customers. And so if in heavily regulated industries like FSI, if you have a compliance incident, you could get fined for that. So that's a hard cost savings. There's, in terms of unplanned outages, Forrester estimates an hour of unplanned outage at $546,000 an hour. That's based on both the application revenue loss as well as the reputational harm that you could incur from an outage, right? An unplanned outage. And obviously that's going to vary depending on your industry, depending on the workload, things like that. But these are all factors that are part of Ansible where you could eliminate number of incidents as well as mean time to resolution, lower the mean time to resolution so that your overall downtime goes down. And then you can try to figure out what value that represents to your enterprise. And then you have a lot more KPIs that you can add to your business case, right? You have what I talked about, which is the operational efficiency benefits. You have kind of unquantifiable benefits in like the end user experience. So if you're automating, maybe you'll have lower latency, you'll have lower turnover, or you'll have returning customers, repeat transactions. You'll be able to implement new strategies better, time to market benefits. All of those go into the benefits in terms of business value benefits of what executives care about at your organization. They don't really care about how Ansible is going to automate and patch these servers. They care that it's going to make your organization more operationally efficient. It's going to cost them less. It's going to lower the risk that they have to the company. So I'm going to go more into detail on the way that Ansible creates value. And when you talk about any IT solution, we really categorize it into 4 different types of benefits, right? You have your revenue growth, you have cost optimization, you have strategic improvements, and you have risk avoidance. And I'll go into more detail on each of these categories of benefits. So cost optimization is kind of the most obvious benefit of automation, right? You're able to do more things with less resources. You're able to do tasks that would have taken you hours, and you reduce them down to 0 sometimes, because all you need to do is just write a playbook, write a workflow, and you no longer are doing those activities. And as you add to your environment, so if you have 1,000 servers now, but you have 2,000 next year, and you have 10,000 the year after, you use the same automation. So as you grow your environment, your ROI increases. So that's operational efficiency, and that's a big part of the Ansible benefits. So the other big part of this is also risk avoidance. I mentioned that $546,000 an hour for unplanned downtime that Forrester estimates. I actually did a business case for a large FSI customer where I used this figure, and they actually said this actually is in line with what we put our own internal cost of an outage for, because the applications that they were running when they have an outage, an hour of outage, it's over $300,000 worth of revenue generation that's lost, plus more than 200,000 in reputational harm that they get from that outage, right? So that, along with the security incidents and the compliance incidents, being able to eliminate that from the workflow, those are things that can be actually very, very significant in the business value of Ansible. The other aspect of this is what we call revenue growth or business opportunity costs, right? So if you're able to automate something, say provisioning like the dev, test, prod environments for an application that generates revenue, if you're able to use Ansible to automate that, and you go from something that would take 6 months and you make it, reduce it down to 4 months, that's 2 additional months that your application or your project has been deployed. So if you have an application that's tied to, say, $1 million a month in revenue, that's $2 million by investing in Ansible and reducing the deployment time and being faster to market. So that's the business opportunity cost of Ansible, and that's also a big part of this, right? If you can actually tie revenue generation of a project, an initiative, or an application to being able to do it sooner, so you can start realizing the benefits sooner, right? And then you can kind of do the math and say, well, this is additional revenue that we've gotten that we wouldn't have gotten if we didn't automate. Strategic improvements. So that's something that's usually more of a qualitative or a narrative rather than something associated with dollar costs, because these are things like being able to change the culture, right? So we have a customer quote where they were saying that different IT units, different silos of their business were able to work together. It created a cultural change and was able to increase the way that or help the way that they did business. They were able to actually deploy new technologies faster and react to the market faster. So these are kind of things that help with the overall strategic benefits of Ansible. And this is the full map of the cost drivers. So you put everything together, and this is really the business case. Like all of these categories combined, both quantifiable and just narrative, qualitative. It encompasses everything that you really need to point out to your management in order to show them the real business value of Ansible. So one of the other things that's outside of that, and I think it's really unique to Ansible, is the fact that there's really a wider adoption of Ansible than most other automation tools. So there's a couple of aspects to that. One of them is that Ansible works across everything, right? Across all domains, that you can use it for server management, you can use it for networks, Internet of Things, cloud management. It's kind of a Swiss Army knife, right? So because you're able to have more use cases, there's more value to be realized. The other thing is the lower learning curve that people associate with Ansible. So people that I've had customers that used to use, say, Puppet, and they said that really the bottleneck to automation creation was that they had a team of a Puppet team, like an automation team, that actually created all of the automation for the organization. Versus now with Ansible, where everyone who does any type of task anywhere in different lines of businesses and different roles can actually use it to automate, and then they integrate it together in workflows to have it work together. So just the adoption of Ansible across an enterprise versus a lot of other automation tools, just the sheer availability of playbooks and modules and content that you can get on GitHub and Galaxy versus a lot of these other automation, just the popularity of it, that also adds to the benefits, just the widespread ubiquitousness of Ansible. So just a few examples, and I'll refer to the IDC Business Value of Ansible report, the study that they did. And I think it was mentioned in the last session, but IDC, back in 2021, did this study. They did an update of it just this past year. They surveyed 9 customers across different industries, industries and globally, geographically, and they came up with these benefits that the median customer attained. So 668% return on investment over 3 years, and you see all of the development team gains, all the operational efficiency gains, the reduction in unplanned downtime, so all the risk mitigation, all of those benefits were proved out in that study, what I just spoke about with the different benefits, the categories of benefits of Ansible. One of the things that, although I think they missed out on, is what I talked about with the widespread adoption. I really feel like they should have kind of asked customers with other types of adoption, how much automation was being created versus with Ansible versus previous platforms for Ansible, or for automation. So I feel like that's a metric that I've seen in the field where I think Ansible really has a clear business value advantage, right? So that I think that's something that they kind of lost an opportunity to explore. So one of the Ansible business cases that I did very recently, it was this year. It was for a very large bank, and we actually got a lot of data from this customer. We got 5 years of execution data, monthly execution data, and cost data that they gave us, and we used their data to actually come up with these numbers. So $1.2 billion or 21.2 million hours based on the amount of executions that they ran that saved the amount of time that it used to take before the automation, right? And these are all their numbers that they validated and gave to us themselves. The downtime that they saved, that they reduced by doing their break glass use case with an automated microservices approach instead of having interactive access, they were able to reduce downtime by more than 30%, right? So each hour of downtime was significant to this organization, and they provided us the internal rate for downtime, and it came out to $29 million of avoidance of revenue loss because they did this. And they actually wanted us to do two things. They wanted us to quantify the last 5 years of observed benefits using their data, and then they wanted us to do a 3-year forward-looking ROI on what they expected to get with continued use of Ansible. So this particular customer, in the next 3 years, they expect to adopt other like aspects of Ansible. They want to start using the event-driven Ansible. They want to start adopting the light speed and the dev spaces. So with all of that, they expected, based on previous data, an acceleration of the benefits that they were able to get in terms of operational efficiency and risk avoidance for Ansible. And these are some of the things that they wanted to add in terms of the benefits. So the newer capabilities like dev spaces, and based on previous customer results, they had 50% improvement in developer productivity and efficiency, event-driven automation. They were able to reduce a lot of support costs based on that, or they expected to based on that. And although this isn't a new feature, they started using the Ansible Hub and certified content collections. And one of the anecdotes they gave was when they started using it, they had an engineer that actually reduced the amount of time that they saved to create an automation from over a month to 1 day, because they were able to get a automation that was in the collections, and they were able to get it approved by InfoSec because it was vendor supported instead, or vendor certified instead of something that they downloaded off of Galaxy, right? So that's a lot of time that they would save in addition to just the benefits of automation and Lightspeed as well, which I think the previous speakers spoke about, but being able to create content better and effectively enable more people to automate and create automation. So the process that we use at the business value practice to actually create the business case, it's called vision to value. And I'm going to go over that really quickly with a real example of something that we did for a customer. So one of the things to keep in mind is when you're trying to get approval for funding for something like Ansible or any IT automation, who are you trying to present to? Usually you want to present to the executives, and they care more about the overall impact to the company's strategy, right? So you want to focus on that versus just focusing on the operational aspects of it that would appeal more to IT operations or the lines of businesses. So the vision to value framework, so a lot of the consultants that are in my practice, the business value practice, I came from a technical background. I was a SA for 5 years, but a lot of my colleagues came from Deloitte and Accenture and Capgemini. So they actually have this methodology, this framework that they use to actually create a business case and try to present it to a business leader, the executives in the company, and have them accept that proposal. So this is what they recommend for actually doing a business case or a business value proposal for the product that you're trying to get approved. So for this particular example that I'm going to walk through, it's a real customer, financial institution. They were already using Ansible, and the IT manager wanted to use this for security patching, right? It was a really time-consuming effort based on the size of the company. And they really thought this would really save them a lot of time, a lot of effort, downtime, and support if they were to do this. But the lines of businesses and the executives really weren't convinced of this. They didn't really realize what Ansible automation was doing for their business because they didn't see it, right? They just saw that IT operations was running efficiently, and they didn't realize what the alternative would have been if they hadn't invested on Ansible, and what it could potentially be once they expand that use case of Ansible to security automation and other things, right? So what the IT team wanted us to do was to kind of show what value we've already brought to the company. And again, as in the example that I just showed, what that potentially could mean if they invested in this other use case, right? And we projected based like on the outcome of this analysis, we projected that it'd be $17.1 million of benefits if they decided to invest over the next 3 years, right? And here's how we did it. The first step in creating this, as part of this framework and creating this business case, is to understand the business strategy of the company at a high level, right? So it's more of not the technology, but what their primary objectives are, what the corporate direction or strategy is. And for this particular customer, it included operational excellence. So the cost optimization, OpEx reduction, risk reduction, all of that was part of what they had as a primary objective for the company. Platform evolution. So their platform is their product. So not just increasing the volume of transactions, but making it more relevant, more flexible to their end user and developing it. And then innovation. And in order to expand the platform to add new capabilities and features and keep up with competitors and outpace competitors in the market, that's one of their primary stated goals for this company. So once you figure out what the main business objectives are, you want to do a value map of so you have on the left, you have the different business objectives. So the operational excellence that I talked about, the continuously evolving platform, the innovation that was important to them. And then on the right-hand side are some of the specifics of that are related to those objectives, right? Things like developer and FTE labor hour savings, and the different operational efficiency benefits that I talked about, as well as the unplanned outages for the platform excellence and all of that. So you want to map that, and then the middle column is what's important, right? So the technology enablers that actually are able to help with those different KPIs. So within Ansible, you have all of these technology benefits like the faster deployment of infrastructure resources and being able to reduce errors and having consistent completion of patches, things like that. We tied that value or mapped that value to what their stated business objectives were. The other thing that we did was prioritization, right? So with Ansible, you can have so many use cases, and it would add to all of those use cases. So you have to kind of prioritize because we can't do everything, right? So this is a 2x2 business matrix that we use in order to figure out what the most important or the most relevant use cases are or initiatives are for automation within the company. So the circles are sized according to how much of an impact this would have, as well as the colors kind of group together the types of initiatives. And then you have your IT priority on the y-axis, business objective on the x-axis, and you have to try to figure out what's on that upper right quadrant that that is actually relevant to both your IT and business teams. And it turned out to be IT security, which is what the use case that our IT team wanted to promote was. So you basically bring everything that I just spoke about together to create this business case. So this is the actual business case that we created for the company, for the IT team, and they were able to present this. They were able to show that this investment was in line with the stated objectives of the company, the corporate strategy, and how it would actually impact financially and otherwise their bottom line, right? So in order to show that really the investment for Ansible, the time, the subscriptions, consulting if it's appropriate, it really was worth more than the cost of the investment was worth more than the returns on the investment was worth more than the investment. So this really helped to present to the customer leadership, and they were able to get the funding approved. So just a summary, what I just presented, to start any business case, any compelling business case, you need to define the goals and objectives, recognize that this changes by role within the organization, and then you want to present the different business value drivers that are relevant to that role. And you break down the ways Ansible can contribute to different capabilities of your business so that it appeals to that role, right? So the next step would be to quantify the value and also frame that quantification around the narrative of the other unquantifiable benefits of Ansible that I spoke about. And this is a sample of the output or an output that we have from an engagement. The way that we usually run these engagements is, so if you're interested, you would contact your Red Hat account team, and they could contact us on the back end, the Red Hat Business Value practice, in order to work with you. But basically, we'll have an initial discovery call to go over the opportunity, what you're looking to do, the inputs needed. We'll go over what the deliverables would look like, what things would actually be relevant to you, and for the business case that you'd like to create. And then we'll customize a list of questions that we'll send out. A week or two later, we'll have another call in order to review the inputs, put together a draft business case, and review and clarify the inputs on the business case, get feedback, and then have a finalized draft. Have a finalized business case that you can present to management. Or if you are management commissioning this, we will present to you as well. So I just wanted to leave you with this. If you did want to do a business case and you wanted some help, we are a part of the sales organization of Red Hat. So it's not a for-fee consulting thing. It's something where you would contact the account team, your account team, and they would help to have you work with us to create a business case. Or do you have any questions? And one other thing is, it doesn't have to be Ansible. If it's OpenShift, if it's RHEL, I'm spending like half my time on VMware to OpenShift migrations. Like, what's the ROI of that? For some reason, that's really relevant to customers right now. But so we can do anything that you have, you need a business case for. Are there any questions? Yeah.
I have a question in terms of the VMware to OpenShift migration. I know recently probably a lot of companies get surprised from Broadcom about the renewal of license of VMware.
Okay.
Do you plan any kind of sessions of all that?
That's like, I do a lot of that, and I do a lot of stuff on that. Yeah, we have material on that. I mean, this is an Ansible event, so I won't go into that, but I could talk to you afterwards if you want to say. So yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Any other questions on Ansible?
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Thank you, Alan.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.